mostly there.
Okay, well then let's call the meeting to order. It's 9 a.m. Take the roll.
Mr. Adam Dance,
Present.
Mr. Walker, Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mr. Jeff Dance,
Here.
Ms. Goodman,
Here.
Ms. Manistee, Mr. Perry.
Here. Okay, approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second. Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Public comment, is there, Barry, anyone beyond Cynthia online and beyond Mead and Hunt who would like to?
There is none.
Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll move on to our presentation from Mr. Ben Munson, President of Contour Airlines. Ben, thank you very much for coming in and being with us this morning. You know, Contour has been sending a bi-weekly report to keep us up to date on what they're doing to improve reliability and customer service. And from my perspective, I think Ben and Matt have really worked hard to address a number of questions over the winter that I've sent their way. But as this board has requested, and I think is fitting, there's no substitute from hearing it right from their president. So Ben's with us today to give us a overview of where they've been and where they're heading and how they plan to continue to improve. So Ben, why don't we turn it over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for the board for having me here today. And a special thank you for Adam and Barry for the dialogue that we've been able to have over the last couple months. I think one of the first meetings that I had in my role at Contour was hearing from the board. I think that might have been might have been day one actually for me. A little bit on my background. Hopefully this isn't too repetitive for anyone. But I've been in the industry for close to 20 years at this point. I'm relatively new to Contour, so just with the company from since the start of January. But most of my background is related to regional aviation, particularly on the commercial side, and a little bit of exposure to operations as well. And have worked with Matt in a little bit of a consulting capacity for the last couple of years. So I did have some visibility to the organization. And just with some of the scaling up that has happened for Contour, really since 2021, 2022, I've come on board to really kind of build out the organization, be reflective of the size of what the carrier is today, to make sure that we're able to perform at a level of operational reliability that I think is fitting for our communities. And so very much since the start of my tenure here, I've been very focused on Manistee in particular, just knowing some of the challenges that we had when we first kicked off operations. Some of those were a function of the short timeline, and some of those are just things that as an organization we needed to execute better on. And I'm pleased to report that I think we have made some progress, and I wanted to talk through a little bit of that with the board as to the steps that we've taken and the results that we've started to see. And there's still other areas that are opportunities for improvement, and kind of wanted to talk with the board so you've got an early sense of what's in work for the continuous improvement objectives that we have for our business. And then more than anything, just want to be here, an opportunity to hear additional feedback. I know it's very helpful for me to hear in that first meeting what some of the concerns were, what some of the feedback was, and then with the ongoing conversations that I've had with Adam and with Barry of just understanding where we need to improve, so I can take that back and execute that for our organization. So maybe we could just reference some of the information that's in these slides here. But first, just to give a little perspective, like Adam mentioned, roughly on a kind of a 2-week cadence, we've been providing updated operating metrics, operating KPIs, and the most important things that we typically think about is what our on-time performance is and what our completion factor is. on-time performance, what we're usually measuring to is what we call A14, which is that you're arriving within 15 minutes of the scheduled arrival time, which is what the Department of Transportation and the FAA also use as their metric for on time. And so it's a good barometer for us in the sense that we can measure ourselves against the Uniteds, the Deltas of the world, because they have to report out on those metrics. And candidly, up through, in the fourth quarter of last year, in the first part of this year, those numbers have been in the 50s, the 60s at best for Contour, which is pretty far off of what the industry standard should be. We've put some initiatives in place, and we're really starting to see that materialize in March, where we had about a 78% on-time performance so far month to date, and expect to see that as kind of knock on wood here a little bit, but looking in the next couple of weeks, wouldn't anticipate anything materially changing with that number. And that puts us right on par with the industry average. A couple initiatives that we've had to make sure that we're performing at a higher level of service than where we were previously. The biggest emphasis has been on the maintenance side. That's something that, for what's in our control, has been the most challenging for us. And practically for the Manistee Chicago route, that's addressing two things. That's one, addressing what our touch time and maintenance support is here. And then it's also on, how we're able to touch our aircraft and get responsiveness in Chicago. And so for the Manistee market, one thing we did is an interim step is we supplemented our full-time technician with Cadillac, who was here to meet each one of our morning departures. If we didn't have our own technician on site, to make sure that if there was issues that were addressed, they could be in touch with our maintenance control, and we can work through any of those issues to get the aircraft out. That's something that didn't exist with the organization. And just last week, we relocated another individual up to the Manistee market. She's actually here already. I think is here today. So that we've got two full-time technicians in the market. It's somebody that's been with us for a long time, actually in our hangar in Tennessee. There's a lot of familiarity with both of our aircraft types that'll come through here, which is interested in permanently relocating to northern Michigan. So it's a great fit for us and hopefully for the community as well. And as a result of that, with every one of our departures, we'll be able to have one of our technicians meeting the aircraft for the departure with kind of full 7-day coverage. On the Chicago side, we've also scaled up there from a maintenance perspective as well. There's still some initiatives that we have to improve the responsiveness of some of our contractors. After this, I'll be taking our 1 o'clock departure back to Chicago to actually spend some time with a couple different vendors and for continuous improvement related to that part of the operation. But I do feel a whole lot more confident about where we are from a touch time perspective for our maintenance support on our fleet for everything that's going to be operating in the Manistee Chicago route. I guess just to stop on that specific point, given that that's been kind of the highest profile issue for us, are there any specific tactical questions related in that regard that I could help address?
What I'll ask about is maintenance of GSE. That's an issue over the winter.
Yeah.
Likely going forward.
Yeah. So there's two things with that we're doing, and it's a very fair criticism.
And just for the more GSE ground firms equipment, so you know.
Right.
The ice trucks and related.
Yeah, but mostly the ice trucks.
I was here for the incident.
What's that?
I was here for the incident that day, actually.
Right. So, yeah, we've had a lot of challenges. De-ice trucks have been a challenge for us across the board. I think there's two things, or really kind of three. I think it originates in the sense that, we were on a relatively tight timeline in terms of the startup and having to procure equipment, and that puts you, the reality of that is that you end up having to just find what's available. And acquiring a de-ice truck, especially one that's of any quality, is very difficult to do in short order. And some, I think, compromises were made with that. What we're looking at for next season is bringing on some additional newer units to give some perspective of how challenging this is, the units that we're looking at, if we want to have them in place by November of this year, we have to place the order by the first week of May, basically. So to give a sense of like if you actually wanted really new high caliber equipment, the type of lead time that exists, and that gives a little bit of frame of reference as to where the challenge lies when you kind of wind back to 24 and you're trying to start something in short order. In addition, there's kind of two other structural issues that I think we've had that we're going to be addressing for the upcoming winter that will have an impact by the upcoming winter. One is that as an organization, we haven't had a specific GSE mechanic, not just for issues when you've got equipment out of service, but just for like the regular recurrent maintenance that's required. So we're hiring that individual. The position will be a very important one for our organization. It's something that'll cover the entirety of our system, of somebody that's just willing to travel and service that equipment with a level of expertise. So we're still finding the right individual, but that's somebody that we're going to be hiring, and I think that'll be good for out of service issues. It'll also be good with recurrent maintenance. The other issue in particular, I mean, I think we've got a good set of employees here in Manistee, but really kind of just system-wide, I think we had a bit of a training issue, especially with some of the like more complicated equipment, like how to best utilize a DA's truck without blowing hoses and things. And so something that we've already set up with a vendor for next year is that we're going to have 2 rounds of training, both internal training that we're going to be doing, but in conjunction with an outside party that we've set up so that for the start of winter ops in 25, 26, they're going to be going through the system, especially with an emphasis on our northern markets. They're going to have more exposure to this, to make sure that we've got 2 layers of training, kind of both things that we, would handle ourselves internally, but then also something, having an outside party that, is going to be able to hold us accountable and kind of serve almost as an audit function, to make sure that we've got everybody, fully trained to, the best of a reasonable ability to be able to service that equipment and prevent out of service issues. Any additional questions on that, or things that I could specifically address?
Has Contour made a decision whether they will buy a new de-ice truck, and place that order on or before the May 1st deadline?
We haven't made the decision as to what it's going to be, but we will be procuring new de-ice equipment. There's a leading vendor. There's who I think it's going to be. But then it's also, you're making a very significant investment in new de-ice equipment. So a new de-ice unit, even something that's more economical, $130,000 to $150,000. So the procurement process is one that, we're taking seriously, but we're not going to be jeopardizing our ability to operate next winter, and we're going to make sure that we get that order just with the right vendor and somebody too that kind of the part of it is the equipment, making sure that that's right, that it's, good for a market like this where, you might not have a ton of immediate GSE support. And then also just that you're going to get the recurrent support from the vendor and with their ongoing abilities to support us. So we're going through that process now.
George, maintenance is your world. How's that all sound to
I
you?
did it all in Chicago for United Airlines, so
Oh, great.
I know the whole world,
Yeah.
from 777s to belt loaders, you name it,
Oh, that's great.
yeah. Do you think your problems with the operation and everything were due to rapid growth and just ramping up real quick and going from a few cities to a lot of cities and just lack of manpower and now quick training and everything like that?
I think those are some of our challenges.
Yeah.
For sure. There was a lot of communities that had seen their air service deteriorate, had other regional airlines that were pulling out. Contour, even though it was challenging to grow because of the regulatory environment that we operate in, there was some additional flexibility that we had to be able to go into those places, and we excited about serving those communities and a lot of confidence that we're the right long-term solution for those communities. And so, a lot of really good intention to go into a lot of places. that I think it did take a little while for the company to catch back up.
Well, from the time the Department of Transportation announced a contract, or awarded a contract to, Contour's start date, what did we have, Barry, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month?
It was less than a month, I don't
Okay,
remember.
less
It
than,
was unrealistic what happened.
so they became operational in less than 30 days, when I think customarily you have 90 days.
90 days
Or more.
is typical.
And I talked to one of our premier snow removal companies in town, and they indicated that this season was the greatest amount of snowfall in the last 5 or 6 years. So we had a new airline who got ready and started on October 1st in 30 days, and within 45 to 60 days thereafter had one of the worst snow occurrences in about a half a decade. So, you know, the issues are reflected there, and what I'm pleased to hear is that, you know, Contour hasn't ducked it or dodged it, but they come here this morning and looked at it head on and have said, you know, purchasing a new de-ice truck, they have a GSE full-time mechanic you're bringing on system-wide, and they've brought another full-time mechanic to Manistee, so there's 2. Would be, have one available for every departure. Understand that correctly?
Yep.
So, hopefully that would position them to deliver best-in-class service.
Correct, yeah. And I think, you know, it's taken us a little while to get there, but what our KPIs look like today, again, are very standard. You know, when we look at, you know, a high 70% on-time performance, 100% completion factor, that's really, you know, the industry's kind of at that level for on-time performance and at 99% completion. So we obviously have to show consistency in that, make sure that we've got everybody's trust and to validate that we've made those structural changes. But I do think some of these investments that we've made and some of the processes that we've managed to have materially improved where we're at. And things will get easier as we get out of winter operations, but we're also taking the steps that, you know, winter will come again, and that we're able to go into 25, 26 with a stronger footing than we did this year.
So what structurally are we lacking? So we always like to point the finger at the other, being the airline. What are we lacking that we need to improve upon to make you be more successful?
You know, candidly, it'd be great and easier for me to give a bunch of, you know, negative feedback about the airport or anything, but I know there was some communication things that happened that might have been partially on our side as well. Yeah, and I think it was probably shared.
It was really good.
About coordination, but Barry and connected, I think some of the other leadership here connected with our system operations control, and I think there's been excellent coordination, and that hasn't been always the case in other communities that we serve, in terms of making sure that we've got a really good understanding of kind of what the condition of the runway is, getting a local perspective on weather conditions, those sorts of things. There's challenges that I don't think are a function of the airport, in the sense that, you know, some of the things that we discussed about, you know, just the fact that we have to have kind of our own, like, maintenance technicians in market, you know, procuring all of our own GSA and things, but that's a little bit the nature of kind of operating in a more regional community. I don't know if there's anything that jumps to mind right now from the airport's perspective that we're concerned about.
Well, admitting that there's been a problem is half the way to getting a solution. You know, from what you're showing here, starting March 1, things have been pretty positive, so I guess going forward, that's keep an eye on things.
Yeah, and we'll continue to provide updated reporting into and anything on a regular cadence or anything that is, you know, if there's anything that's ever needed ad hoc. The other thing that we've been doing is making sure we're providing perspective on what the passenger traffic is looking like as well, because I know that's an initiative for the airport, you know, to getting to higher level of employment, and also, you know, what that could mean for other, like, supporting businesses for the airport, as well. And those numbers continue to look really, really encouraging. we look at kind of where March is, and in particular, we're getting some like early visibility into like April and May levels as the seasonality comes back and getting the second frequency into the market. So our traffic's been, you know, up 20% year over year in the last couple months. And I think we're gonna see an even more significant growth as we get into the peak season for the market. One thing I did also wanna mention outside of, the things in that we're doing to like specifically improve on-time performance and completion factor is also talking about how we're handling irregular operations and kind of our customer service interactions. We spoke about that a little bit in January. We've made, I think, some progress there, in terms of being able to partner. A lot of those were related to Chicago for us. And just as a reminder for anybody who's not familiar, you know, we've got obviously complete control of our environment here. I think we've got a good team of folks here. We've got a really good manager. We've been making an effort knowing that some of these changes were a little bit more structural and would take some time. So providing refreshments and things and donuts and stuff for customers, and just small things that to provide like a little bit of extra touch. On the Chicago side, being able to be in T3 and connect in really well with American, the way that we were able to achieve that is to work with Envoy, which is their primary regional, as our handler, both above and below wing. And you know, there's some challenges with that, just in, you know, I think they tried to be a good partner, but the reality is, I mean, it's just a massive organization. They've got their own operation to take care of. They'll also support American Airlines, and when you're Contour, sometimes you kind of fall a little bit down the list of priorities when things are challenging from an IROP perspective. But we have supplemented that with some of our own personnel, and we're moving in the right direction with that. So one thing, and I don't know if anyone's had this experience, but up until very recently, Contour was spread kind of all throughout T3. We would just be told, okay, you're at this gate or you're at that gate, and they could be in totally different concourses and things in Chicago. And you can imagine for us trying to control our operation, that becomes really difficult, because even if we put our own headcount on top of American, they're kind of running all over the place, and departures tend to go out at the same time for connectivity and those sorts of things. We've now partnered with Envoy that we've got 3 consolidated gates on G that are all together. And so what we've been able to do, now we've got one really good manager in the Chicago market. We've got another supervisor that started last week, so that we'll have always Contour personnel there as well to make sure that there's a higher level of engagement to the extent that IROPs do occur with the customers, and we're able to get information to them more quickly. And as well on the back end, we're building out a kind of new portion of our SOC that's specifically tied to customer engagement. So like this morning, we had a delay. That was a carryover from the weather yesterday, as a function of crew rest. But the team, and I don't think this was candidly happening as much before as it could have. It's something that's sometimes unavoidable when you've got the weather like in Chicago, and just the nature of, you know, a single crew that's coming through and they've got to have their regulatory rest. That we know that the night before, we can make sure passengers are aware, give them the opportunity for reaccommodation, and to the extent that they don't want to be here for hours, get in front of them, and the team's been doing a better job with that, and we're going to specifically have individuals in our SOC that only have that function going forward. So do anticipate that we are going to be doing better for our KPIs, but the nature of regional airline operations, there's still going to be challenges, still going to be times when people don't get the best experience or being able to make an on-time departure or a non-cancellation. But those are also opportunities for us to differentiate ourselves and have a higher touch point than they'd experience with other carriers, and we're making a real effort to be able to do that better.
A follow or a comment and then a follow-up question. The comment is an observation of just how the system works. Contour, even if they have the perfect system in place to notify people, a lot of the quality of that notification will depend on where you book. If you're booking on some obscure third party, we're probably never gonna get the notification because all the information that Contour has contacts that third-party booking service. So that, and they rarely forward that onto the passenger. So if you want to get notifications, you need to either book with Contour or with a major directly, American United. If you're going through something else.
Expedia Kayak Priceline, you mean?
Those are quality ones.
Those are the better,
EcoAir, there's 100 different things out there.
So are you selling tickets through the lower quality third parties?
Yeah, I mean, like, we don't, those ones, it's almost like hard not to, because they just pick up and scrape off of other GDSs and things. But yeah, our preference, even with even Expedia, those of the world are perfect. So if somebody books with Contour, United, or American, the customer experience is going to be a lot better.
Do you track, while I think your example is true, how, what's the breakout of sales for people buying off Contour's website versus others? Do you track that and know that mix?
We do, yeah, we track more regularly, like, I guess, like, the ticketing code, which, like, so was it like someone that booked it as a Contour flight or somebody that booked it as an American flight or a United flight? So we have that perspective, and in terms of like the actual GDS, I don't know offhand what like goes through Expedia or Orbitz or that. We could certainly find out.
But how many are booking through American United or Contour? Is it 60-70%?
Yeah, it's probably, in terms of like not going through an OTA, it's probably 75-80%. But it is a fair point that like if somebody ends up, especially in one of the more obscure OTAs, then like they're just not.
No matter how good a process they have in place, there's
2 out of 10. I think if he's got
Yeah,
80% booking through there.
That would have been my number if someone asked me that off the top of my head too. So you're always gonna have a minority of people that when there are irregular operations, which first part of your conversation was all about minimizing those, but unfortunately they're always gonna happen. There's only so much you can do, and you can't be perfect because the system is flawed.
And I think that you won't, I mean, I don't expect perfection, you know, but I think good customer service goes a long way. So they might not get notified, they might show up here, they might be angry, but good customer service can tap that down a bit, you know, and I think that that was a missing piece that we were having when we were starting up, because a lot of people, again, we can't control what happens down in Chicago, but we can be really good here. We can meet them and say, hey, really sorry about this. I mean, you know, again, we all can't control it, but we can always say, sorry, that's all people want to hear, you know? And so I think that the customer service piece of it really needs to be important. The other thing I've brought up before is that I don't know that. I would have never known that if I would book somewhere else, that this could happen to me and I wouldn't get notification. I mean, we had a commissioner that would just, was pretty adamant about a booking situation, but she booked on one of these other sites, so she may not have got the information. So somehow, some way, I just think it's important to educate our community, and I don't know how we're gonna get that done. Great big article in the paper, you know, with some of these kind of things, I don't know.
Why don't we have a
Website.
sign right here in the airport, and we'll put it on an easel, and it'll explain this situation, how Contour has an automated system and reaches out, but, right when you walk in the door up by the ticket counter. But if you've booked through a third party, Contour cannot guarantee that its information will end up with you. A notice.
Well, there tends to be a reluctance, and it's not just it's all airline industry. There's a reluctance to deliver bad news. Try to mitigate it, minimize it. It's an industry thing. And that openness changes perceptions if it is, as opposed to we'll get there kind of one of these, you know.
Yeah. I do think there was some of that was happening, that we're trying to more proactively address as well, in terms of, I think it's an interesting perspective that I've had, because a lot of my job is kind of managing I guess, like, the brand and what the customer interface has been and the perception of that and our relationship with the communities. And then on the other side of it, in the operation, you actually see kind of the back end and what people are trying to do. And there was a lot of times with Contour when we were struggling that the back end of it was a bunch of people in the office and our flight crews and our stations and doing everything they possibly could to get flights out. But the reality was, it's just not being realistic about, like, this isn't gonna happen. And we just need to call it earlier and give people another option. And I think we've been trying to be, and airlines have fallen into that trap. You know, one that comes to mind, it was like probably 10 years ago now, JetBlue got caught with this, right? Where they just like had a tendency never to cancel or never to try and take delays. And then eventually that catches you because the operation can never effectively reset. And then you just roll with delay after delay for days. And so we've been trying to, it's a specific strategic change that we've made in SOC about kind of the calculus as to when we realistically have to make that decision and notify customers. Not to say we like throw up the white flag immediately, but also just more realistic so people can make better accommodations.
And actually, that was gonna be my follow-up question, is that pattern of continued delay, I think, caused more frustration on both ends. People here, I mean, had people sitting in the terminal for 12 hours, dwindle over time, but
Right.
It's not like they're gonna go shopping here either.
Right.
And that led to a lot of frustration, I think, throughout. And so my question is really, or you kind of just addressed it by, you know, what you're trying to do, but I guess a suggestion I would have, you know, I would say kind of an industry standard is 4 hours is kind of the maximum delay. After that, it becomes, so I guess I would like to see, if you get to the 4-hour mark where that flight hasn't gone out yet, and you may or may not know when it will go out, I think at that point, the passengers deserve to be notified and given other options.
Mm-hmm.
Saying, okay, this flight may still go out today, we just don't know yet because we're working an issue that you can't pin down. But at least at that point, they can start making other plans as opposed to being told
Creeping
2 more
delay.
hours, 2 more hours, 2 more hours. And they want to believe, but then at some point, when it's 8 hours, they get so frustrated that they leave negative comments then. But I just think that there's some point where, if it gets to this point, even, you know, if it's gonna be another hour, you've got other options.
Right.
We can reaccommodate you out of Traverse City, we can, you know, put
Right.
you on tomorrow's flight, just as opposed to just those constant delays.
Yeah, that's very fair, and that's the direction that we want to be headed. And, 'cause it's been, I mean, before, it was that, especially when you don't, all of these things fit together, right? Like, if you don't have a technician in market, and you just don't know what the situation is, you say, okay, delay it an hour, right? And those are the sorts of things that are happening, then you're scrambling, can I find another airplane, can I find a part, whatever the case is. And now that we're able to get that better visibility, we can make more realistic calls, and as well as if something is an unknown, being able to provide reaccommodation.
And I think unfortunately, the essential air service, alternate essential air service mechanisms around compensation for you encourages you to delay rather than cancel, because as long as that flight goes out, you get compensated, and if it doesn't, you don't, and it's can be a significant amount of money. So
Right.
you're incentivized to do what you're doing up to a point that it impacts customer service, where then counterproductive. So
Right.
unfortunately, the model encourages you to do one thing, even though it's counterproductive in other ways.
Right, well, and I do think that it's not, we can take the best of both of those things, in the sense that what we just wanna do is, even if a flight was to roll to the next day, that's generally still providing some value for some customers. And then it still allows, you know, compensation, but making sure that that is actually, again, that it's, if it's 24 hours later, it's 24 hours, it's not 24 increments of one. Right, that's where we're trying to get to. And so that even if this flight is tomorrow now, or if this flight is 4 hours from now, whatever the threshold is, that, okay, we can get you to Traverse or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, you've introduced a new conundrum for me, because these flights that are delayed until the next day, in my own reporting, it's like, I'm calling it a cancellation because it didn't happen the day it was scheduled, but yet, from a compensation and reporting standpoint, it's also a completed flight, so it's just
Right,
interesting.
and we manage that from our perspective too, like anytime we're reporting cancellations, like in the previous reporting where we've had cancellations, we treat those as cancellations.
Okay.
From the airport's perspective too, like if you're not operating in the same calendar day, in terms of holding ourselves to a standard, we don't treat that as a delayed departure.
Ben, I'd like to say that from the customer standpoint, if I booked a flight that is supposed to depart on Monday and it gets rolled over and departs Tuesday morning, personally, I have zero value in that flight, because I've made plans to do business later that day.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a family going on vacation, you just lost a night in a hotel that you paid for.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think the hotel cares that your plane got out the next day. So, I just wanted to underscore that from a passenger standpoint, that if you're leaving the following day, from my vantage point, there's really no value in that flight.
Yeah, and just to emphasize, it's very much like not our goal to be doing that. It's just that to the extent that if the capacity might provide value to somebody, it also, as a practical matter for the operation, normally you have to kind of reset and get back on track in most cases, or it'll force another cancellation in some other way.
Right. Anyone
And
else?
then my last comment, and Karen touched on it as well, and I think Jeff did too, is just, I've felt over the last 6 months that one of the things culturally within your organization that is kind of lacking is really a sense of pride in customer service. And I think it shows in different ways, and it's just something I hope you can work internally to improve on. I think it manifests itself in a lot of little details that just lack in an overall feeling that this airline cares about the customer to a high degree.
Right.
Can you give some examples of that, Barry?
Well, there's some of the things that you've touched on with lack of station personnel here being accessible to the customer. So throughout the day, people come into the terminal, walk over there, it's dark, lines are closed, there's no one there. Come over to the desk on our side, on the GA side, asking questions. We, knowing that there are people there, go over, knock on the door, and then that person gets help. That's not, it's not our job over here to be getting you out of the office to do that.
Right.
So it's little things like that. It's, some of these delays, and a lot of that is station people don't necessarily have the right information to be conveying it to people, so therefore they're reluctant to, because they're getting essentially mixed, I don't say mixed messages from SOC, but, not a definitive, and sometimes there isn't a definitive answer. We don't know. But sometimes I think that answer is better than, we don't know, is better than saying, oh, we think it'll be 2 hours, and then it's not.
Right.
And I'm in the people business. First thing that you can always say is, I'm sorry you're going through this. That means a lot. Then you can go on to, how can I help you? Let's see if we can work this out. 3 big phrases that you can use that will tap people down from being highly emotional and then be able to work through a situation. But you can't hide behind the lines. You can't sit out in the back room. I mean, you have to be there.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, and I understand. I was gonna spend a little time on the situation with the blinds. There's a reason why I think that that's been that way. I think that there's like nuance in the assessment of that I'm hoping that I can provide some perspective on, that we can get to a better outcome, so that Contour comes across as more open and welcoming. And I would say a couple of things on the customer service side, that very much as an organization, like, we want to be customer focused. And I think a big challenge for a lot of our station personnel is them not having that information, even if the information is that we don't know, this is an uncertain piece. And so what I was referencing we call it like our CRC team. Contour hasn't had a CRC team, which is a group that specifically sits in SOC, that's not dealing with flight crews, they're not dealing with aircraft rotations, but their specific job is about getting information out to customers, and also, and of course, and people that will be touching customers, like the station personnel. So what we really want to do is make sure we're empowering our station folks, that they're able to have the best possible information immediately, just before the customers do, so that they're able to address those situations. And that team goes live for us April 1. And so it's been something that's been in work. We've pulled our very best res agents out of reservations into it. So they're people that are familiar with our systems to a degree and have already performed at our organization, that are going to be like our highest caliber kind of CS sort of folks. And I'm really excited to see how that manifests. And then on the other side of it, on Chicago as well, I don't want to give any sort of impression that we're just throwing in the towel and saying, oh, it's all Americans' fault in Chicago. We're taking steps there too, that understanding the reality of what it's going to be part of a larger organization, or relying on a larger organization, that we've got, we can't treat like a regular vendor. Like, the reality is our relationship with Americans, sometimes you have to manage that a little bit differently. But we are going to have 2 additional Contour personnel, again, in the same sort of, in a contained operating environment. So those folks are going to be augmented by the Envoy people, but we're going to have some of our top folks right in market alongside of them, and again, in a consolidated space, so that if there is an irregular operation, that we've got an immediate touch point into our customers with people that know our systems really well and can take care of customers.
Related to that, something that's in my head as you were just talking is complaints that I've heard, and it's not something I've followed up, so I'm really more just curious to have you explain how it works, is I've received numerous complaints that when people call in for support, that they're generally just getting a reservations person, not someone who actually specializes in customer support, so they feel like they don't get any information because they're not trying to book a ticket.
Right.
How is that process supposed to work, so that those get funneled to the right type of people that can address the right type of issue as they're calling in?
Yeah, I mean, really, like, what we're hoping to achieve, and we'll probably learn some things from this and kind of re-optimize, but with this creation of the CRC group, is just like with station personnel, the idea that our res will also be fed that information. So really, the idea is they exist. They're not talking to customers directly, but they basically get any potential person that could touch a customer, whether via phone or whether in person, the latest information and kind of where everything stands.
So an example I have is someone's calling because a bag was misdirected. Calling the 800 number, that's one of the types of scenarios that people say it was worthless, they didn't know anything. Whereas generally the station people here are better suited to answer those types of questions, but they're not here all the time either. So how does someone get to the right person to ask a question like that?
Yeah, it should be able to call into our reservations, and that,
Okay.
to the extent that that's feedback I can take back. I was thinking more of like an IROP.
Right, no, that's why I kind of like,
Yeah.
there's a whole set of types of questions, and
Yeah, absolutely. If there's folks in reservations and that aren't able to get customer support with that sort of issue, then that's a training issue for us, and that's something I can take back.
I've traveled a lot, and I usually say that we are the Chevy Chase, our very big vacation people. If it can happen, we've been through it. All the way from Kauai, where there were 2 flights out, and one ended the day that we were supposed to leave. So everything was chaotic and crazy, to Hilton Head, where we flew in or out in the middle of a storm. In those 2 situations, should say the eye of the storm. Customer service, if I think when we got back from, like, the Hilton Head one, it's like, we jumped on a plane in the middle of the eye of a storm in a little plane, and it's like, but they were, like, so good. It's like, oh, you'll be okay, it'll be fine. You know, get off the plane, everybody, hurry up, get on the plane. I mean, the customer service was so good that you just didn't feel anything but, oh, we can do this. Same with Kauai. You know, it's like, sorry, those are all canceled, so everybody moves over to this side. Again, the customer service, right there locally, you know, they were the people that I could have cared less about the airlines. I probably can't even remember the airlines we were on. It's just that right where we were at was important.
Mhm.
So people can make sure that you're at least feeling comfortable, that you're, you know, I mean, I don't know, there's a million things, but just, again, that one little thing of, sorry this is happening, you know, what can we do? You know, I think Barry said you give coffee or something, or donut, you know, just those things are good things.
Yeah.
And so,
It has,
and Manistee's one of those communities where you do it wrong once,
right,
and it sticks.
right.
And right now, we have one that likes to blast us constantly on social media. Though it is changing, because she kind of gets put back in her place by all the responses of, on tour is great, we love it, fabulous, blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
it's changing, more people are positive, but again, great customer service, I just can't push that enough, I've been saying that since we started.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, yeah, feedback received, and it's, from our side, it's very much about first, before we focus on anything else, we want to get the the KPIs and the operation in, like, a reasonable place. That we, like, and that's the best thing we could possibly do. And then we've done some of the smaller tactical things, like with the donuts and the refreshments, and, like, credit to our team. I was here yesterday when I came in. We were a little late just with the de-ice issue in Chicago that every airline was going through. And then the weather deteriorated here, and they had to take a couple-hour delay. The team worked really hard to try and get the departure out, plane de-ice, you know, covered in Type 4, and then, like, you know, and then window closed, and came back, and just the way that the team, you know, accommodated that, immediately had refreshments out there. Everybody was smiling and things, and I do think that we're starting to make a difference, and part of that was because, again, and I've worked at a station with an airline before too, like, when you can actually be proud and day in and day out what you're delivering, and knowing that this is the exception and not the rule, is going to manifest itself better than anything else that we can do, and we're very focused on it.
And I think everybody recognizes that, you know, our start was bumpy, but, pretty amazing to me how it switched over as quickly as it did. I think we all expected a few bumps as it started out, because what'd you have, like, 30 days or something, less than 30 days. So, and I appreciate that you're coming here and talking with us, and it's all improving, it's all getting better. We're also looking at kind of a stepping stone for us. I keep telling everybody, and I know everybody else has different feelings, and we're moving forward, we're moving up, I should say. So if you had a wish list, one or two things that you would see as a benefit for this airport, what would those be?
I think a couple, I guess there's two sides of it. One would be on the commercial side, things that make it easier for people to travel here. And so one thing, you know, hopefully not jumping ahead on anything with this, but, like, I know there's, like, an initiative for, like, a brand on the car rental side or something like that. Like, that would be really compelling in terms of, you know, the way our economics work is that, you know, we need the alternate essential air service subsidy, but ultimately, if that's all we had, we'd be losing money, right? So we still very much have exposure to being able to sell people on the idea of using Contour and coming into Manistee. And I think, like, the thought of us growing, and I'm so excited to see what the summer looks like. I think it's gonna be like nothing this airport's, like, I'm very excited about it right now with what the advances look like. But still, you know, it's not gonna be 100% load factor. And, the thought of like coming here and not being able to like get a car, or understand that you could get a car or something, I think is going to be like a limiting factor. And so from a commercial perspective, I was to think about the way things could be structured here, like that would be really interesting. And then, you know, there are challenges from if you were talking about a regional airline wish list.
Mhm.
I think anytime you're in a smaller market, some of the challenges that you have of just, it's difficult to have two full-time techs on your payroll that work 12 flights a week. Like, that wouldn't happen at United Airlines, right? Like, that, or you're probably working 12 flights a day or something, you know what I mean? Like, so, and in some of the larger stations, you might have like more support that we could rely on, or other like 140, like maintenance facilities
Mhm.
or technicians in the community, like those sorts of things would be
Sure.
very advantageous so that we could like leverage some scale a little bit, I guess.
I wonder how you were swinging that with two time technicians.
It's challenging, but it's, yeah, like, our position on these things is that if we need it to execute, like, we'll never build a good airline if we're running poor on-time performance, poor completion factor, and if you don't have touch time on these airplanes, they're not brand-new airplanes, that people don't, so, like, you need touch time on those airplanes for them to be reliable, so we do that, and then we'll figure out the economics on the other side of it. Like, it has to be that way, otherwise it's fundamentally broken.
I look forward to a good partnership.
Yes, us as well, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to be in the community.
So Ben, I mentioned to you that we've, reached out, to some nationals without luck. Does your schedule permit you to follow up, reaching out to those national rental car companies and trying to make a second bite at the apple for
Yeah.
us?
Yeah, absolutely.
This week?
Yeah, happy to do that this week.
Okay, thank you. I've spoken with a Contour representative, in the negotiated agreement in a very brief 10-minute conversation on the blinds was one blind up and one blind down for a trial period of time, for an hour around departure. I think we've been through our trial period, and just to be candid, I think what's satisfactory is to have both blinds up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And at least from my chair, I'm only one person, but my
I'll qualify the 24 hours while they have people here.
well,
Yeah.
okay.
That would be my same recommendation. If you've got people here in the office and someone walks in, that person needs to be able to know that someone's here.
Is there any alarm, like, you know, you can do a sensor?
Well, you know, Karen, if we walked into the Hyatt, we wouldn't have one blind open and one blind down at the concierge desk or the bell stand. And we'd be open for business, right? And so if we want to be a best of class airport, I think it starts off with by what's the nonverbal impression our customer gets when they walk in the door. And the problem with a blind open and a blind down is it looks like a trailer park when the blind is half up or down. So I think we want to get away from that first look, okay?
Say white trash.
Yeah, and I will take that back. The background there is just that I think, I mentioned it, my intuition with this is that this is related to SSI.
Yeah.
I'm sure
that was the reason
And
given.
I will take it as a takeaway that I think that there's probably a solve there because it's a regulatory thing. I don't want to make 100% commitment without being able to talk to my team, but I do understand that there's normally a solve in these situations, and I will. And I understand
I'll give you even some examples. When stations start up and you have a crew of IT people here trying to get, the turnovers are just amazing how that happens in one night. You go from one airline to another airline and everything changes. But the IT people were actually part of some of those early conversations. They said, well, we can order you, you know, like special screen blinders so that you cut down the distance or the angles that the screen is visible, and then you just allocate that monitor to look at things. And
I hate those things.
Well, but, again, we're dealing with regulatory requirements here.
I know, so do I.
You have to follow through, but I think,
Right.
as you point out, I think there are workable other solutions that
Right.
balance customer service versus the regulatory requirements.
Yeah, I understand the reason, and I understand it's important, and I suspect there's a solution, I just want to be able to
Yep.
go back.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
I'll do that.
And just another little thing I would add to what Adam just said is better signage out on the counter, like hours that people are generally staffed here, so that when someone comes in and it's outside those hours, they at least know, oh, if I came back during this time, I could
Or a
talk
number to
somebody.
call on the sign.
Well, the number is the 800 number.
That's fine, but
But-
they can put it on the sign if they're,
Yes,
Printed
yes, so if, outside of hours, call this, we're generally here these hours, so just people know more information. And it's not that me and my staff don't want to be the provider of information, it's just, it could be much simpler with just basic signage like.
Right, that's good, I'll take a note for that, that makes sense.
you know, is, our airport looks at planning and budgeting and the longevity of contour service. One of the discussions that's been had around this table is what impact does, DOGE and potential government cuts have to contour? And how is contour, staying on top of that? And what do you see as the financial risk to contour in Manistee?
Right, well, I guess to qualify this, that I, can't know any of these things for certain, just from like an apolitical side, like, you don't have anything
You don't have a
definitively.
phone call?
Right. But I can speak to how we're managing it and our perspective on things. And so one, the essential air service or the alternate essential air service funds are absolutely critical for Contour's operation and for Contour to be able to serve Manistee in the way that we serve it today.
And roughly, they cover 80% of the operating costs of the route,
Correct.
so that, it's significant.
Right, it's not like a around the edges sort of thing, right? It's what allows us to operate in the market and provide reasonably, like, economical fares for folks. And so I guess that's the starting point. What we're trying to do in terms of like managing is that we're making sure that, we've got support in DC where we can. So we've got somebody that's, advocating for us, and of course that they will be tied in for advocating for the Essential Air Service Program as a whole. But more structurally, the guidance that we've been given from the folks that we know in DOT, and it's a relatively small number of folks that are actually in the Essential Air Service market, is that this is something that, is going to be protected. And I think intuitively that makes sense. If you think about the constituents that benefit from the Essential Air Service Program, it tends to be conservative. And on top of that, if you look at the most recent FAA reauthorization that occurred, it allocated significantly more funds to the Essential Air Service Program, changed the KPIs that drove communities' ability to be in the Essential Air Service Program, and that was all done with a Republican-controlled Congress, right? So, our perspective is that that's not going to be something that's touched. We've also gotten positive indications from the Department of Transportation as related to some awards that are pending for Contour, for additional markets, and that's, I think a good indication that things are moving forward, and also that it's not necessarily just like the lowest bidder, but someone who's going to be actually adequate and appropriate for the communities that, are proposing to shift the carriers that they might have in their market today.
Well, how receptive, in your view, or Contour's view, are the major airlines to the regional airlines? Is it positive or more an arm's length?
In terms of working together?
Yes, because I think that's probably the bigger key is, do the big boys want to put you guys out of business, or do they want, and just go to the, more of a regional airports, or maintain the system that we've gotten accustomed to?
No, I think the major airlines are supportive of Contour. And so we've gone to DC with, particularly related to like our Part 380 issues, like we've basically worked with American Airlines. we've got a longer established relationship with American Airlines going back to 2018. United is more recent, but I think for those carriers, they see the benefit of being able to attract customers like into their hub markets and connect. If they're connecting to Contour, they have better access to those customers than if they were to go into a big, like a Grand Rapids or something, and potentially lose customers to an Allegiant or a Southwest or whatever the case may be. Whereas they know they're going to get the full share of the customer set. We very much make that business case for them. And so just last year, both Alaska and United Airlines became partners, so they're very much in that direction, and we're regularly talking to both. It's not something, I mean, they're $50-60 billion businesses now, like they don't, there's other things that, like, we really fight for attention to get the meetings and things, but I do think that they're supportive and they don't want to see us go away.
And again, partnerships, anything that you need us to do, we are in people's ears as well.
Yeah, that could be really helpful in the future. That's great to know.
A couple things I'll just add on kind of past weekend, Congress did a continuing resolution to extend funding throughout the rest of the fiscal year. In that continuing resolution, the funding levels for airport improvement, which is our capital grants, as well as the AAS, are at higher levels than they were in 2024. Kind of the word on the street is, well, continuing resolution just maintained spending. It actually, for aviation, increased it to the levels in the FAA reauthorization bill, which was passed last spring, which laid out funding levels for 25 through 28 or 29. And they actually included in the continuing resolution those higher levels. So Essential Air Service is funded now at a higher level than it was last year.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a card.
And then the other thing is that the new Secretary of Transportation is from northern Wisconsin, and his former district has an Essential Air Service airport in it. So I think that it bodes well from some basic support at very high levels.
And as part of his confirmation was supportive of was asked and supportive of the Essential Air Service program.
George, is it code sharing or interline with United, Alaska, or just a partnership, or?
It's interline agreement, and so from we're kind of in a unique spot in that the interline allows us to work with multiple carriers, right?
Because I just tried on United and it doesn't recognize MBL at all, so you'd have to go through Contour to.
You weren't able to book it?
Should.
No.
That was working a while ago.
Now you've got me curious about that, because it should be working, that's.
Yeah, it should.
Is it, yeah?
What did you shop, just curious, with?
MBL to ORD?
Oh, they don't sell it locally?
No.
You'd have to, like, if you were booking.
If you did MBL to Denver, then you would see it.
Yeah.
Oh,
But just the Contour only part,
right.
you have to.
Yeah.
If there's a continuation
Correct.
on their airline.
Yeah.
But
I
if
see,
it's
yeah.
just a stops in Chicago.
So if it's, and anything, and this is kind of ties into like maybe like us communicating best booking practices for folks, but like,
Yeah.
we're the only ones that sell locally. I mean, people could book it via Nexpedia or something, but it's really just, if it's going to Chicago, it's sold on just on our metal. And United or American or Alaska wouldn't sell that, but they do sell the connecting itineraries.
And that's why from our marketing, we direct people to our airport website, because we then route based on where they've chosen, either to Contour or off to
American or United.
Depending on that, to kind of hide some of that complexity so they don't have to make that decision.
I wonder if our website shouldn't have a couple of sentences on it that encourages people to book direct through Contour, American, United, and goes on to say that if you go into at your own risk because delay information you may not receive timely delay information if you book through a third party. I think we should, I don't think the general public, that's common knowledge to the general public that they may not receive information as timely.
I mean, The reality is that if you book on those third-party sites, even if you're booking purely United ticket, you will have that same issue. It's not specific to Contour. My concern is, people don't read, but even if they do read, I don't want them to think of flying out of Manistee as they're flying in a inferior product and there are all these warnings. Well, then I'll just go to Traverse City, but you'll actually face that same problem maybe if you flew out of Traverse City. So it's a balancing act of how to convey that without making us look like we offer an inferior product.
Well, we can have that internal conversation then. I think what I'm picking up on is we know of a potential pitfall and we've identified a problem, and the problem is the customer is disadvantaged with respect to the conveyance of delays if they are through third parties. And so that's what we should address.
Positive way is a challenge, but yes. Since you asked the interline question, I'm gonna follow up with the code share question.
Mm-hmm.
The code share with American has been in the works forever.
Mm-hmm.
Any closer to that?
Well, there's still not a timeline on it. I mean, we're advocating for code share with American Airlines. There's pros and cons with code share. It's a good thing to know, like, going into it. But I do think from our side, we definitely want to be able to have the option to offer that if we can. And so we're still advocating for that. One good thing that we've had, this actually relates to operational issues as well with American, is that before, when they were our only partner, we'd only have so much leverage. And now that we've got United Airlines as a partner, they've been much more engaged to talk about, because now passengers that exclusively would have connected to American Airlines, like, we're seeing a good amount of traffic connecting to United, and they're bigger in Chicago now. And there's some interesting competitive dynamics, I guess, that have been going on for a long time there, but that's obviously a very competitive market for American and United. And so we've been trying to leverage that, candidly, in a supportive, positive. We're very appreciative of our American Airlines partnership and stuff. But I do think that that is something we will eventually get across the finish line. What is important to know with code share is that there's good in it. You get FFP, you get, there's some seams that are closed versus like an interline connection. But, you know, ultimately your bags are still connecting the same way. And there's a little bit less control that you have over the fares, right? So what we're able to do in Manistee is we're able to go in a very competitive pricing. I hope folks have like seen that the fares we're very aggressive on. And we also can do things on the back end that folks wouldn't see, that's more challenging in code share, that where we have like fares that are only combinable. And so that's to say that, like, you might, even though if you're charging $100 to Chicago, because practically that's where we have to have the fare end up, we know that, you know, somebody connecting to Orlando might otherwise go to like a Traverse or Grand Rapids. So we can say, well, people that shop Manistee, Orlando, only get added $50 to whatever the Chicago fare is, or things like that. You can get a little bit more creative on the back end with some of those things, which is advantageous when you're trying to be competitive. So
part of the reason I ask is later I was going to ask it when my airfare report, because that also can work the opposite, is for whatever reason right now, the airlines out of Chicago are pricing fairly high, but out of Traverse City, it is less to fly Traverse City through to something than it is Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what you're adding on, it's a lot more. And with the code share, American can fix that because they can price Manistee the same or close to Traverse City, whereas right now they can't because they'd have to lower their Chicago fare to make Manistee work better. So the code shares have, those are some of the benefits.
It kind of goes,
yeah.
It goes both ways. Yeah, because
I've seen with our previous carrier, there were times, it kind of follows, but.
Right. there's things that we can do, even from an interline side. It's interesting that that's the case, because, typically what's been happening, like, we've been seeing a lot of growth in all of our Chicago markets now that we've had the United, interline come on board. That's been really helpful. I mean, you've more than doubled the amount of connecting seats, right? So of course, that's going to happen, effectively, that we're able to sell. But then on top of it, now you're effectively introducing multiple price points. So for the people that are shopping with the meta searches and like the Google flights and those sorts of things, like, they're gonna get served what's the cheapest combining fare. So whether it's American or United, and now you've like more than doubled the number of options with that. And so if Manistee doesn't have competitive pricing, that's interesting, and we should spend time on it, because we can control part of it.
Yep. Conversation maybe we can have after the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just some details that I
Yeah.
should talk with you about.
Yeah, that'd be great.
How many cities out of Chicago do you go to besides us and Kirkland, is it?
Kirkville
Kirkville.
is the other one that you're, I think, thinking of. So then we've got, Marion, Owensboro, Cape Girardeau, as well. And then we're going to be adding, and Fort Leonard Wood. So it's a decent portfolio of service. And then we've been recommended for, a couple other markets, like Burlington and Quincy as well. And so we'll be going to the Chicago base. And then we do have a decent portfolio of flying into Charlotte as well, some of which will likely get reallocated to Chicago, just given how well the United partnership is booking for us. Which all of those will be good things, and that, like, as you scale, specifically in Chicago, and especially through reallocation, and it's not an additional burden in the system, just the swap opportunities that creates, the economic situation that allows us to get more maintenance personnel and CSRs and those sorts of things.
Okay, anyone else? If not, Ben, thank you so much for making the flight up and your time and your cooperation. You know, I'll say this, I've received, emails from Ben at about 3:42 in the morning, at 9:30 at night.
Yeah, I think you only are on email between midnight and...
It's kind of like the catch-up time.
Well, the reason why I shared is, you know, we asked for bi-weekly reports to frankly hold Contour's feet to the fire. And, Ben made it a point to do it regardless of what time of day it was. And I think that, is deserving of sharing it with this group, to say they're really working around the clock to improve the quality of service they provide. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the partnership.
Okay, approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
George. Is this roll call?
All in favor?
All in favor? Thanks, Uncle.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Treasurer's report. Susan, you wanna?
Sure. You have in front of you the February accounts payables that I need you to approve. Pretty standard. I don't think there was anything that, I do have one question though. The PFAS grant, do you know how much longer that's going to be buried?
I think we're near the
Near the
end
end? Okay.
of it.
Okay.
They've submitted their draft final report to
Okay.
Eagle,
I knew it was getting close, so,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. So we're getting
but
it.
I believe there's...
There's gonna be another phase, but this, right, this is
There's
the third phase, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
there's,
okay,
I believe there is additional money in the current fiscal year
Yeah,
that they're
okay.
trying to figure out what they're gonna,
yeah.
how they're gonna allocate
I knew
that.
we were getting close to closing out
Yeah.
this phase, third phase, so. A little bit of PFAS, but that is, all reimbursable, so, and then, we're pretty caught up with the, corporate flight, which is the Contour payment, so this is the February payment that you would be approving once we get reimbursed back for the January payment. So I just need you to approve the accounts payable.
So when you say caught up, they receive funds,
We have not received received the January reimbursement yet. So February won't be released until we receive the
But
January.
we received from Contour their payment, well,
No,
not EAS,
no,
but.
no,
okay,
that's a different
But
topic.
you're
Can we
gonna-
talk about that so
we're
I
gonna,
can
after we,
understand that?
after we approve the accounts
This is
payable.
the.
Can we talk about it now?
Yeah, sure. So, but it just goes along with the next section, so we can just approve everything all at once, it's okay. So, Contour did reach out to me and ask me for our, direct deposit information. I think they're supposed to pay us, this week, so hopefully, once I get that, I'll let Barry know. I'm not sure, like, why it's been taking so long. I've been sending monthly invoices to them, so,
What month do they owe us for?
It's the beginning,
yeah,
it's October.
October
They have
through,
not-
November, December, January, February, March. How do we find ourselves 150 days in and we don't know how we found ourselves here?
We've talked about it every month.
Well, should we get Ben right now?
Well,
Let's get him. I mean, to me, to be 150 days in on this amount of money
Quite a
and not know why, to not know why, to me is the biggest problem.
yes, I mean, after last month's meeting, he got on it, but we don't have the answers to why this happened.
Let's try to catch him, okay? We can't go 150 days and not know why our money isn't coming.
But I will say, when I did, back last summer, when, doing reference calls, this was what other airports said was typical. They would pay 6 months. Ben mentioned Cadillac Aircraft, coming in. They actually stopped coming in because they hadn't been paid, and when they stopped coming in, then they got paid.
Yeah,
So,
not a good practice.
it,
matter of them not getting the government money in to get out.
well, I know we were running a little behind with, a first payment, so
yeah,
it took a
there
little
were some
time.
things with us in
Like,
DOT
I
to
think
get reimbursed.
they didn't get their first
that.
payment from us until almost December, so.
Right.
So on their end, it might just be trying to get everything caught up. And I know they did reach out, and they're supposed to be sending a payment this week for us.
Hey.
Great, back already.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't going anywhere either, so I was in the terminal, but.
There's the chair right here.
Yeah, I was thinking that
This
long.
is in front of the camera,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I can move.
Yep, that's okay.
Okay, great. Well, Ben, thanks for joining us. Frankly, we have a issue that I don't at all understand, but I thought the best way to figure things out would be to get you and our airport director and our treasurer together so we can get to the bottom of cash flow. So, Susan, can you explain to us the trouble that we've been having to receive our payments from Contour?
I don't know the problem, but we just haven't received any of the payments since you guys started for October for the monthly, like rentals and all of that.
And we've gone through over
Yeah,
the
we've
last
been-
month on this, and, you know, so part of it is, it's supposedly, everything is supposed to be paid as of the 14th, which is Friday. We're only one business day after that, so I don't know when that actually happens. But I think part of the bigger question is, how did we get into this position that 6 months in and only now are the invoices that are being sent all along, you know, being deemed worthy to pay?
Right.
And one of the things that I mentioned while Adam was out of the room is, you mentioned Cadillac Aircraft Service, and I know they actually stopped coming because they hadn't been paid, and once they stopped coming, then they actually got paid. Orchard Beach Aviation hasn't yet been paid, so it's like, it seems like there's a pattern, and when I did reference checks for, you know, other Contour airports last summer as part of the EAS process, that was kind of a common thing I heard is expected to take 6 months to get paid, so, you know, I based on what I know, the problem should now be taken care of, but how did we get into this situation? Because it doesn't reflects poorly on Contour's business practice.
Right, and so both with the airport and with Orchard, my understanding is payment went out last week. And so that should be reflected, if it's not already.
I'll take a look when we,
Quickly.
yeah.
So some of these are, I got feedback, well, let me qualify this first. Say that outside of all the operational things that I'm doing that impact things like DH trucks and customer service and things, there's improvements that have to happen on the personnel and the technology side related to our AP, AR, everything that we're working on from a finance side. And so we're making some of those changes so that information comes through more quickly and that we've got better visibility into what payments haven't been made. Everything exists in a very manual. This is not an acceptable excuse. This is just the real answer is what happens. It's very manual, and as a consequence, things get missed. Or not appropriately prioritized from a timing perspective, and we're going through a process to change our AP process really, to make that better. I do think with that context, I think it was shared to me that I think there was some initial challenges in terms of like how the information was being received. I think it was delayed. I know like Orchard in particular, for some reason wasn't, I think we had to reach back out. I don't know if we'd actually gotten those invoices directly.
You had, but they were lost.
Okay. And that's why I wanted to qualify the information that came to me was that, you know, when I followed up, again, it was kind of me getting the information via email of like, hey, this is, what's going on here? And it was, oh, that's not even in our system. Right, so it's just processes that we have to get cleaned up. There's, as an airline, I think really with any like hospitality business here, there is going to be, it's more challenging from a cash flow perspective as you go through the winter months, coming into the summer months, but it's also not our intention not to be paying airport partners or vendors. With Cadillac, we should be fully caught up as well. Again, there's some of that has been kind of the back and forth, and there's also maintenance personnel changes that were made, including their initial point of contact, not because of anything with Cadillac, but because of other performance issues at the company that I think probably created some of that.
Is there an automated receipt to remove possibility of an invoice is sent for payment, that it's sent to the wrong email, not received? How do we, if we have senders of invoices thinking they're in the appropriate place, but they're not in the appropriate place, how do we get a confirmation that Contour has received a bill?
I'd have to follow up with our existing system as to whether what's possible. I know that I want to move away from what we're currently using for AP. And the ways that, like the systems that I've used in my past at previous companies, would basically have that going into an inbox that would then give the vendor or the airport partner that positive confirmation that it's been received, as well as positive confirmation about whether this is received in approvals, whether it's submitted for payment, what it gives, just full visibility of that on the other end.
Well, the reason why I ask is because it's frankly very unfair to our county to have them bankroll this operation for as long as they have. So I want to make sure on a going forward basis.
Yeah, so let me interject here. So what's going through my mind is the dog ate my homework. And if we don't get payment within, let's put a timeline on it. We always talk about timelines. 2 weeks. If we don't have that payment within 2 weeks, we need to contact and let's get this shored up. Because again, as Adam stated, we at the county have gone the extra mile in regard to making sure this all can work with what we have to do because of the alternate essential air service. So we've got to float that monthly, and that cash flow becomes very important, so.
Yeah, it is very much not our intention that, to be leveraging the airport to finance our operation. So apologies that that occurred. I think also, to reciprocate, I think from our perspective, I think there, like, we wanna make sure that we're kind of receiving the alternate EAS funds in a timely manner as well, and I know that that was a challenge also.
That was the startup challenge.
We
Which
kind
is
of,
partly why we kind of let it go a little bit, because we were slow, but it was
without
really
it, without
last
it,
month where it came to a head.
right, without it being negative from our side, I do think that there might have been that dynamic with people that made decisions that shouldn't have been made on our side, where when we met months without getting paid, when again, it's like 80% of the revenue that we're expecting to come in, that then there was a, well, if we're not getting paid, we're, you know,
Yeah,
that, and that's not a healthy dynamic.
understood, but we're not at that point.
Correct, and we don't wanna be at that point anymore.
I think my message to everyone is let's not let it go so long on either side of the ledger. Ring the alarm much sooner, please.
Right.
Barry and Susan and all parties involved.
For sure. And I didn't even, the reason I didn't mention is, like, I do think that that's fine, just from like the revenue side, and I think it did ripple into something else, but that's not something we should carry forward.
As far as I'm concerned, it'll be behind us when all parties are square.
Yeah, 'cause now the key is getting caught up from 6 months.
Right.
Is it gonna be all one? You might not know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like 120,000, right? Something to that effect.
126.
Yeah, yeah, so that was the number. And it was like 20K to Orchard as well, so
Yeah.
that, I think that was their number.
Yeah, we're just waiting for the January reimbursement, and then, once I get that, should be probably this week, we'll release the February one then.
Excellent.
So we should be right on target, 'cause it's about a 21-day turnover from when we submit it for reimbursement to when we get it back, so,
Okay.
yeah, yep. So hopefully this week we get that, so we can run it. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Yeah, of course.
Promise we won't call you back in.
No, it's still okay, I didn't want to
Oh,
be
let's
in-
not
I
overspeak
can't
it.
make
Oh,
that
no.
promise, Karen. No.
Alright, and I will go put in a phone call and be 100%.
You probably don't have a vehicle here, right, so you can't really like.
I do have.
Oh, there you
I
go,
can
there you
take
go.
off if you-
Oh, there you go, there you go.
Peel it out.
There you go.
Okay, I'll just give the thermal, thank you.
You're very welcome, yep. All right. So I will, check today, but I don't know if it'll be, they were doing an ACH to our bank. I'll check today when I get back in the office, and if it's not there, it should be there tomorrow, if they did release it on Friday.
You mean contours
Yeah.
released to us?
Yeah, so they reached out on Thursday and asked for all of our banking information.
Case number finally.
So, and I know they were supposed to release that on Friday, but I left at 11:30. So if it's not in there today, it should be in there. Some of them do take up to 3 days to post. It just depends on which bank it is, so I'll keep an eye out for that. And if we don't have it by Thursday, I'll reach back out and ask when they paid.
Well, should we withhold our disbursement?
Yeah, I mean, we probably won't get reimbursed back for that until probably Friday, so, you know, we can hold the February payment until we make sure we have that from them, if that's what the board is deciding to do today.
Well, board, let's talk about it. I would have no trouble withholding the payment until we see a flow of funds coming in. Just so Susan has clear direction and there's no room for misinterpretation.
What I'd like to do is then pay the bills pending reimbursement.
Yeah, considering the time frame and what's going on, I absolutely agree.
So not to release the February payment until, I get the payment from Contour?
Yeah, and have they done an ACH transfer with us?
No, this will be the first one.
So the pass-through, this is for the AES fees,
Right,
but the pass-through, which is like 700,000 a month, that's.
300 and some odd thousand right now.
Well,
Yeah.
in the summer,
It'll
it'll
be
be
like,
700,
yeah,
winter because of
winter,
one flight, it's
300,
about half that.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so that has been getting reimbursed.
yes,
That's
yeah,
all from
'cause
DOT.
that's federal,
Okay.
yeah,
To us.
Okay.
yeah.
I just, from my point of view, that's the worry some point of the county. Obviously, the
Right.
100,000 is also
Right,
important.
right, yeah.
Our agreement with Contour states that we don't reimburse them the subsequent month until we
Right.
get reimbursed
From the
ESP
previous,
for the previous.
right.
So there's always a little bit of delay built in
Mhm.
because of that.
Mhm.
So if the federal government's sending us money and then it's passing through us and going to Contour, we already have an electronic banking relationship with Contour?
No,
We send them paper checks?
no, so we send them money, but Contour has never sent us money.
I get it, but
We have their bank account, they don't have our
They
bank
just don't
account
have ours
until
set up.
last Thursday when they finally asked.
Do you have a contact person there? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to get one contact person?
At Contour? It would be nice, I have a,
do you need
email.
one, Susan?
No, I have an email with somebody's name attached to it that I can reach out to if I need to, if we don't get it.
Yeah, but they have a phone number.
Probably, I have a phone number for all of that,
I think,
cause I also send them the bills, the invoices every month.
I think it would be great if you were on a first-name basis with whoever your peer is over there, so that we could get matters resolved more quickly than where we are today. So if you, it just doesn't sound like there's a good working relationship back and forth behind whoever's sitting in their desk.
Well, and it could be a different person that writes the check or sends the ACH versus who approves the funds to be
And then-
released, so.
Who's entering it?
All of those things are very true, but, you know, should we bring Ben back again and say, who should Susan talk to when she has a problem?
I mean, I don't think you need to bring them back in, but if whoever has contact information for that person, just make sure Susan has it, and then Susan can,
Given who email Susan has and given their title, they are the appropriate
Right.
person.
okay.
Which is somebody totally different than the AP person. I have that person's contact now that just reached out to me on Thursday, so.
But the process is really simple. You
Right.
email an invoice to accounts payable at Fly Contour or whatever their airline is, to submit invoices.
Mhm.
The fact that they disappeared in that system, Ben was, fairly frank, although, skirting the issue a little bit, is they've got some internal process problems that they need to solve.
When did
And
we
it sounds
start?
like he is aware of it and is working on it.
And we've been sending invoices out since October, Susan?
Since November, or October.
So do we need a motion pending receiving of their?
Yeah, so I would just approve the accounts payable and then these, but then in the motion, just say, to withhold the corporate flight management payment for February until we receive, reimbursement from them. Or not reimbursement, but for
When
payment
did you have that?
for October through November, or I mean, October through January.
Yeah, okay.
And that is for,
I don't know the dollar amount.
no, I'm
Corporate
looking,
flight management.
yeah, I'm
Corporate,
just-
I mean,
yeah, but I'm looking for what, is it just the,
the 305,000.
revenue and expenses?
It's for the 305,424.
You're talking which report?
Yeah,
It's in the accounts payable section.
for the accounts payable then, so
Mhm.
that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Yeah, it's second.
Thank you, George. Okay, a motion and a second.
Mr. Adamdot?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jeffdot?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. Plukarty?
Yes.
Okay, do we need a general fund
Yeah, we kind of already went over all of that, but I mean, if you wanted, there was nothing in the capital improvement, and then we kind of already went over the financials, the revenues and all of that when we talked about. That's really the only outstanding item is that in piece.
So then it's a motion and a second, so we combine A and C for accounts payable and financial statements.
Sure, we can do that.
A motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Support.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Mr. Adamdot?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Dot?
Yes.
Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. Hardy?
Yes. Okay, thank you much. Committee reports.
Adam, if I could just ask,
Go ahead.
I keep staring at our meeting hunt people
Oh,
online. When are they,
why don't we have transition, why don't we do that under transition committee and we'll just skip right down to that and.
I just,
Allow them to jump in.
because I'm seeing them online and
Perfect.
you're not.
Thank you for the reminder, Barry. Stephanie, are you here?
Hey, good
Are you
morning. This is Stephanie Green. I apologize that Stephanie Ward is unable to join us this morning. She had a family emergency she had to attend to. Thanks for having us. We just wanted to provide a brief overview of the manager transition report. I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to review it yet or not. But we've been asked to keep this to 15 minutes, so I'm gonna try really hard to just kind of hit the high points. Barry, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes. And you need me to enable that?
Oh, it says you need to allow it. Mm,
Should be good now.
okay. Can you see me now? Oop, here it comes.
Here it goes. Yep. You're
Okay.
coming up.
And Barry, is it okay if I just run through, basically what was done and just the highlights? Is that what you guys are looking for today?
I believe that's what's, yeah, I think getting to the highlights and getting to your conclusion is
Okay.
what we can do in 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect. That's what I had planned. So anyway, to conduct this evaluation, we interviewed peer airports, and I'm gonna go down to that slide real quick. Um, we prepared an airport management survey, and we sent that to the airport managers at Pelston, Chippewa, Ironwood, and Muskegon. And these airports were primarily chosen because they, one, they're all in Michigan. Two, like you, they're all EAS, Essential Air Service airports. And they have, similar level of commercial service, but yet they all are managed very differently. And then we did get a physical comparison of airports just so you can see where Manistee stands up against these other airports in terms of operations, pavement, snowfall, because that does impact level of, how many employees you have to have. For instance, Ironwood here with 151 inches of snow has a higher demand for snow removal than Manistee at just under 55. So we went through and just did that comparison. So you could see the differences between airports. If you want something that's the closest to Manistee is probably Ironwoods in terms of infrastructure and operations. So from the airport manager surveys, we wanted to look at what do they do day to day? How are they funded? Where does their local funding come from? How many staff do they have? What are their staff's roles and responsibilities? What is the cost to employ the staff? What equipment do they have? Who owns it? Who maintains it? Who provides fueling, FBO service, and air service? So then we went through and we looked at the different management structures, and this is what, is very interesting. So Muskegon is owned by the county, um, but they're all private administration, private FBO, private 139, and then there are services provided by a local municipality. And then Ironwood is owned by the county, and it's fully staffed by the county, and that includes ARF. Chippewa, also all county, but they have an EDC that's involved, but it is affiliated with the county, an Economic Development Corporation. And then Pellston is similar to Muskegon. So they contract their 139 staff, their fuel, and their ARF, but their administrative staff is employed by the county. And then here at Manistee, you have, the authority is the owner, manager is private, and the staff is all private, conducted by OBA. So then we broke down, we looked at how many full-time employees does each airport have for what they do? How many part-time? What is the cost? What are their responsibilities? Part 139 responsibilities, because you have commercial air service, are a lot more strict than if you were just strict general aviation. Primarily having certified ARF professional available for each operation conducted by the commercial aircraft is number one and critical. And then we wanted to look at, like, what are the services these airports offer? As you see, Manistee prides itself in being a top-level general aviation facility, and it does offer a lot more services than most. Muskegon would be a close second. But you could, catering, crew cars, car rentals, where some of them, they really just have fuel and maybe a place to park, and that's it. They don't offer any of the other things. When we look at the cost of staff, we took cost provided by Barry. So what does it cost right now in Manistee? And so after kind of going through a couple of renditions of what these costs actually are, contracted versus actual and various things, the OBA staff contract is $337,000. The director's salary is $56,000. Then there's a supplemental to get back to contract price of $31,000, and taxes are $9,000, so a total of $434,000. Now, when we collected the data from the other airports, Muskegon, which is contracted at, plus the ARF services, they're at $900,000 on a contract for the staff, and it's an additional $200,000 for ARF. Ironwood, you're a little bit closer to Manistee with 667, all being county operated. Chippewa 1.3, and that number came from an actual audit cost to employ as a total. And then Pellston, they've got a contract for 700,000 with Pellston ARF that does their 139 and their ARF, but their administrative staff then beefs that up to 857, and that is they have an airport manager, and it is an assistant manager, but they call it it's a new position, deputy clerk, I believe is what they call it. So then here's just kind of a comparison of where everybody shakes out. So we brought back some of the infrastructure operations versus the cost to employ, and then just broke down cost per square foot of pavement, cost per operation, just for comparison purposes. So then we get to the alternative analysis and looking at the different alternatives, and the alternatives that you really have available for Manistee is that alternative one would be that the authority employs the administrator and the assistant manager, deputy director, whatever you want to call that position, as well as the FBO, ops, maintenance, and ARF staff. That's considered alternative one. Alternative two is the authority employs the administrator, but the FBO, ops, maintenance, ARF, all that 139 stuff is privately contracted. And alternative three privately contracts both administrative positions as well as the 139 employees and services. So to kind of get a comparison of, what would it cost Manistee to employ these under the authority? So these were costs provided by the county for reference. So roughly the county would be looking, or the authority would be looking at providing a director with a $90,000 salary, and then the benefits to 128.7, assistant airport manager around 68, operations, maintenance, fueling, and that is 4 full-time positions, 86,000 apiece. So when you look at the cost to employ across the board, 1, 2, and 3, we estimate the cost to employ for alternative 1, all authority staff at just over, just under $550,000. Alternative 2 is gonna be the 197, that's gonna have your director, your assistant airport manager, plus whatever that contract price is. So if you wanna look at comparatives, like Pelston contracts those same services, they're right around 700,000. And then alternative 3, that's all privately contracted, so, that price really is dependent on, whatever responses you get to your request for proposals.
What, in alternative 1 above their staff,
Uh-huh.
at the 344,800 number for ops staff, what sort of
That's-
hourly rate is that?
Let's see. We use what Barry does now. Let me find Barry's survey. That's Muskegon. Dubois. I would probably put Barry last. There we go. Okay. So Barry gave us OBA wages for ops 178. Hey Luke, if you were listening, do you have that breakdown handy?
Stephanie, I think if you went
Are-
back to your slide where you laid out, the
Are you looking at the
manager
hourly
cost.
rate, the hourly wage?
The hourly we used to, well, actually, no, no, there was not an hourly. We were provided with a cost from the county that we used for those 139 positions. And that was in the next one. That was this 54,000 plus 32,000 in benefits. So we took that 86 to multiply that by 4.
54, that's roughly 27 an hour.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So then we did identify some equipment that is currently owned by OBA and not the airport, and is stuff that you may want to replace. And just kind of a range of costs of what we're looking at to replace that. None of it's really super high dollar items, but we did want to make note that they do exist and need to be considered. And then we kind of went through a, decision matrix. Under alternative 1, the green ones are generally considered an advantage and the red one's a disadvantage. So you have more control at the authority level over the administration under alternatives 1 and 2, where the county lacks or the authority lacks administrative control if you're going to privately contract that manager and that assistant manager. Under alternative 1, under the authority, there is a chance that your level of service to GA operations is lost. Just because those employees, if employed under the authority, they tend to get spread out a lot. Whereas when you have the private FBOs, they tend to focus in a little bit more on the increased level of service and the extras, as we like to call them. 1 and 2, there's an increased workload on the authority for staffing and management. because those two administrative positions would fall under the authority under those two scenarios. Whereas under alternative 3, you cut the check, somebody else worries about managing the airport. And this next one came from just general conversation that under alternative 1, it is unlikely that existing staff would stay on board. However, if they were to come under a private contractor, it is likely that they would look to be employed by the private contractor. So, costs are a little bit better to get a handle on under alternative 1 because we're able to take those costs from the county and roll them out. Whereas until you get your RFP out and solicit for services, the costs for the contracts are really unknown. I mean, the best we could do is compare what Muskegon has one for 900 less ARF, and Pelson has one for 700 that includes ARF. And then, also under 1, the authority may need to purchase equipment, especially the FBO type related equipment, whereas when you privately contract for the 139 FBO ARF and fuel, the contractor is more likely to provide that extra equipment. So we did want to look at some, level of service, additional administrative responsibilities. We wanted to point these things out, especially the additional administrative responsibilities. When you're a 139 airport, and then if you become primary airport, the paperwork gets even, a little bit more cumbersome. There's a lot of grant management type work that has to be done once you become primary, that right now MDOT Aeronautics is handling that for you. I personally do a lot of grant management for other primary airports here in Michigan, so I'm pretty well familiar with what the requirements are and the amount of time that it takes. And it is significant, because each grant that comes out each year, you have to prepare your pre-application, and there are, several documents that are part of that. And then before the spring deadline, the final grant application has to be submitted. Once the grants are in place and the projects are in motion, if you're talking a design or planning or environmental grant, those are reported annually in a performance report submitted to your FAA project manager. If it's a construction or an equipment grant, that has to be submitted every quarter. And then grants have to be amended if necessary, if you have change orders, various other things, and there's grant closeout reporting, and that's basically pulling all the final accounting together, plus FAA wants to see pictures of the final product and various reports and things from your engineers typically.
Stephanie, what does a service contract like that cost? To, you said some other airports hired you to take care of all of those grants. What?
Yeah, it honestly varies
So
year to
do you have
year,
a range?
airport to airport, but I typically per grant would estimate about 40 hours.
And what do you bill out for an hour?
Loaded, it's like 220, 225, somewhere in there.
Okay, so what is that, $8,000?
Yeah.
Okay, so $8,000, and how many of those $8,000 grants did you say we need if we want?
Depends how many grants you have in a year. So, if you have an AIP grant and you have a bill grant, then you would need to do that for each of those. Plus, any grants, like you have to have your grants closed out within 4 years. But during that performance period of the 4 years, any past projects that were done, let's say I have one from 2022, until that project is finished and that grant is closed out, we'll still be doing quarterly reporting on it if it's construction or equipment every year until it's done.
I think what I'm really trying to key into is, you said if we become a primary airport, there's a lot of additional paperwork. And
Yes.
what I'm trying to do is put a cost to manage that paperwork there.
Yeah.
So, you have a range?
10 to 20,000.
Okay, great, thank you.
And-
Yeah, I mean, if we do this on call for people, we will oftentimes, if we're not aware of significant complications, we would do like a not to exceed for 25,000 on them.
Thank you.
Since you're looking at those types of things, another consequence of being primary is that we have to float money for these grants for reimbursement, whereas right now the state floats that for us. Am I correct in that, Stephanie?
That is correct. Until the grant is in place, yes, you would typically front for reimbursement.
And the final 10% for closeout, waiting for closeout, is also then has to be floated by the,
Yes, that gets held until till the project's finished and the grant is officially closed out. They withhold the final 10% in reimbursement.
so $1 million a year-ish, you're talking 100,000 to 200,000 that we would additionally need to be floating through the processes
If we became a primary airport,
when we become a primary airport.
10,000 employees
10,000
and some more.
And then we also have the passenger facility charges, and, you know, those are currently administered, but they're done via consultant as well. That's another service that we offer, and we offer for a lot of Michigan airports right now, and those contracts are typically 2 years, not to exceed 40,000 on the PFCs. And then, NEPA, that's all your environmental good stuff. Any project that is done, that is outside of planning, even in design, you have to have your environmental done, as you get into design for any kind of infrastructure improvement. So typically, unless we're doing a really major project, it will fall under a categorical exclusion. Right now, the state does the categorical exclusion, for the non-primary airports. At the time that you should become a primary airport, then that would go to you or your consultant. I do know of one airport that typically does their own CADXs, but that is an extreme rare situation. Most go to the consultant. And so each project has to have one, and they run somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $12,000.
And that's 10 to 12,000 for the management of what?
That's just to prepare the environmental documents and get the clearance through the FAA so that the project can proceed.
So Stephanie, just time check, I think you need to get to the conclusions soon.
Thank you, Barry. Okay. So as we evaluate the alternatives, alternative one has benefits because everything is managed under the authority. However, we do find that in the case of private contractor, sometimes the FBO services are able to provide a little bit more than what an authority or a county or a similar municipality type governed operation would do. Alternative three is typically successful, and it's kind of what you've been running under right now. It can be more expensive depending on what those proposals come back in, and you do kind of lack a little bit of control of the administration. And then alternative two, we see that this one has the most benefits of the two, or I guess we feel that it's a bit of a stronger alternative than the two, because this gives you the mix. You have the authority over your administrative staff, yet you're relying on a contractor to provide those 139 services, taking that off the authority's plate to manage and putting it on someone else. And typically they're very professional at what they do. They bring a high level of service to the GA community, but yet you still have the inside administration. So, that pretty much sums it up in a nutshell.
Stephanie, can you help me better understand the use of the term extras and why it's Mead and Hunt's opinion that the FBO, can manage, better than if the individuals were employed by the airport authority? Presumably, they would be given the same job description.
No, I mean, we're not saying that it can't happen, but typically what we see in the industry are that the FBOs that are private, they tend to offer more services than a local municipality does. A lot of the local guys that, they will fuel your airplane, give you a place to park, and send you on your way. It's really when you get down to the private companies, they really cater to that GA traffic, especially the high dollar corporate folks, where they will offer a lot of great things. Because,
Can you
they're
define those?
competing for the service.
What do you mean they offer a lot of great things?
For instance, the catering, the cars and the various extra services that were listed in figure 10 that some of the FBOs offer and some don't.
For OBA, I guess an example for OBA would be like the flight tours, maintenance stuff, flight training, things like that, that generally you wouldn't have if the county is overseeing that, because, that kind of stuff's more expensive. You're looking at hiring pilots, things like that. So I think that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about with extras. Things, more attractants that can bring, more people into using the airport.
So can you, explain to me the maintenance stuff, what you mean by that? What maintenance stuff? does
Maintenance,
OBA
so offering, maintenance for people's aircraft. They're able to fly their aircraft there to get maintenance done. And I know, like, through Barry, they have a partnership. They don't necessarily do it themselves, but they have a partnership with Cadillac Services that they come and will do the maintenance there.
And there are different types of maintenance and levels of maintenance. Is it, airframe and power plant? Is it avionics? Some of these shops are very specialty. Some of these FBOs have, special certified mechanics that do offer these things.
Barry, do you want to address this or clarify for Mead and Hunt?
Well, I mean, you kind of got it at the end. I mean, Orchard Beach doesn't provide maintenance, but that is a service that an FBO can provide. And so Stephanie was referring to kind of one set of things, which I would call more around customer service type driven services, that a private FBO that's basically operating for profit will tend to focus more on, because based on how well or not well they do things, it impacts their bottom line more on a direct basis. Whereas the things Luke was touching about are things that are generally truly only offered by FBOs: aircraft rental, flight training, maintenance, sightseeing flights, all of those things that traditionally a government entity isn't going to be trying to do. All of those things are a sign of a healthy, vibrant airport, and when they don't exist, their lack is noticed. We're at an in-between because we miss that maintenance piece, which I've been saying for years that it would be really nice if we had that business here. That would really complete a lot of things that would make us attractive.
Karen asked the question to Ben earlier today. What do we need at the airport to grow? How could we be better? And so my question would be, if Mead and Hunt is recommending maintenance and you're recommending maintenance, what do we not have that we need to have to attract maintenance?
Hanger.
Hangar space, we've heard that now for a couple months in different contexts, as different people have presented here. Having that space then gives you the shell for businesses to operate in.
So you couldn't run maintenance out of your hangar or any of the existing
A
hangars?
combination of the Orchard Beach hangar and the historically known as Aaron's hangar, that probably gives you the bare minimum for doing small aircraft maintenance. That doesn't help Contour, other than the fact that if there was a full-time staff of maintenance personnel here, they wouldn't have to be hiring 2 people. They would just contract with on-site maintenance to do what they're paying now people to do. So those are some of those things. So, when Ben answered that question, he said car rental, he said things like maintenance. If we had our own $150,000 de-ice truck that was manned by the FBO, they wouldn't be looking at buying one, they would just be contracting that. So they have to backfill a lot of things that we don't have. We don't have them for a reason, because we couldn't probably recoup those costs in a lot of cases. So we're at an awkward size. We're not big enough to have everything we need, but if we don't have the things, we can't grow. So there's a catch-22 in how we look at our future.
Well, and where I'm really going with my questioning is, if we elect a path to have an FBO, what is gonna change with tomorrow's FBO to provide these beneficial FBO services? Why don't we have those beneficial FBO services today? Is there a capital investment in the airport that we need to make? Do we need to put up a hangar? Do we need to buy a de-ice truck? Do we need to, how do we have to budget so that we can have the FBO that Mead and Hunt describes? And if we don't have the money to put forth, then do we just maintain status quo with the FBO?
So what I would say, and I think it gets into some of the things, part of the committee, you and Dylan and I had a conversation looking through this recommendation, is that the answer to that is, I believe, we need to put out an RFP, that go down that process and see what responses we can get, because we may get some responses that include maintenance, we may get other responses that don't. And they'll come at different price points.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of is the market answer to your question, is we can get what with our current infrastructure, we can only do X. There are things we can do to improve our infrastructure, but given our timelines, our infrastructure is what it is. Going through an RFP process will then give us, hopefully, multiple answers to your question that you can then compare apples to oranges, because they won't all be the same, but they'll have different features.
Exactly, and that's why I think Dylan and I said to Mead and Hunt, at least from the 2 of us, it was difficult to make a recommendation, notwithstanding the costs associated with the bids that would come in for an FBO,
So
in order to know if the additional cost was worth,
correct.
is the juice worth the squeeze?
Correct. I think Mead and Hunt's recommendation is partly based on some of the input, which is this board has expressed a desire that they want to see this asset grow.
Mm-hmm.
The path that leads most likely to growth is their recommendation. It may not be the most cheapest option, and that ultimately is until you start getting RFPs on what things are going to cost, you don't have then enough information to compare this dollar for these features, this dollar for these features.
Right. So the question is how much money can anyone afford to subsidize to try to start to elevate the entire program?
Agreed. George, were you
And
gonna?
potentially how long the results, see
How long
the
does
fruits
it
of
take?
the,
Yes.
Stephanie, we kind of took over in the middle of your presentation. Was there anything else that you wanted to say there as you were wrapping up that recommendation from Mead and Hunt?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, Barry. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Stephanie.
We'll get a copy of this, right? We'll get a copy of this?
I think you did.
I
There
didn't
isn't an
know, I didn't
email,
know
yeah.
the attachment.
Well, maybe only the transition committee has
Yes.
received it.
Oh,
Yes.
Could
Thus
you
far.
send it along to everybody else, please?
Well, there were still negotiations going on yesterday as to some of the wording on this, so.
Well, I think very simply, Mead and Hunt recommended an FBO, irrespective of cost. They said, we will compromise service and quality if the authority takes on what is currently an FBO role. And Dylan and I said, it's impossible to recommend whether the staff should be authority staff or FBO staff until we get the bids in, we find out what services are going to be provided and what the cost of those services are.
Yeah,
So that was the outstanding.
sure, but I prefer to have stuff that I have to watch and look at the screen that I can't even read in
Right.
person.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
copy sent, please.
All.
Stephanie, on that point, what you have on the screen still has the big draft on it. What you sent, the file name said final.
Yep.
So I'm curious why it still says draft if the file name said final.
Well, we know nothing's ever final for until everybody sees it. So, it's still marked draft. It is the final draft. But I know there in all the emails that were going back and forth over the weekend, Steph Word did indicate that we were going to make some changes to some of the language in the recommendation, and we intend to do that. And at that point, the draft stamp will come off.
Okay, so I guess if that could be done today, and with Steph Ward being out, you know, that may not be possible, but if it can be done today, I'd like to get this out to the full board by the end of the day today.
Okay, I will see what we can make happen.
So, Barry, what does Mead and Hunt want to do with the statement that Dylan and I made?
I don't know, I mean, you and Steph Ward were having an email conversation on that yesterday, so. And I'm hearing Stephanie Green say as a result of that, there were gonna be some changes, so.
Okay. I don't know, whatever really the pleasure of the board is. We can remove the watermark, we can leave it as draft. I think, you know, there were a couple of people that said it's just tough to do the economic cost benefit until we get, yeah, and then we'll know. So the report could say just that.
Yeah, but this is their take on, this is what they're recommending to us, so I think what we do from that wouldn't be a part of this report, because that would be a part of what you as the authority are conducting. That's just my,
And specifically, the conversation in the committee level was, given the options that, you know, haven't kind of been eliminated, both options suggest that the authority should be hiring a manager and some sort of assistant. That process could start now. Both options have that. Then what's left to determine is our operations additional authority staff or our operations outsourced. I'll start that RFP, and And then once those responses come back, now you've got cost for this, and you can make that decision, but we can get started.
On all three RFPs. An FBO RFP, a director RFP, a deputy director, all at the same time.
Hiring and RFP, yeah, but yes, yep.
Right, which I also put in the email. I think this report says secondarily, down the road, we'd go out for an RFP for an FBO. And I had said, start the process for all now.
But I think that's Lisa's point, is the report is a recommendation.
What the authority does with.
What the authority does with that information can be exactly that.
Right.
I think it was in our recommendation, we indicated that the potential of an airport manager getting hired first so that they were part of a selection committee for an FBO request for a proposal. We didn't realize that it was your intention to have those happen at the same time.
I think maybe in an ideal world that could happen. It's just timelines and make sure we don't run out of time before the end of the year. Moving things in parallel, I think, gives you some assurance that things will get done sooner than serializing them.
Right. Stephanie, today, can you send the document out to all board members? I think you have their email addresses, correct?
I will have to double check on the email addresses. Barry, if I don't have them all, I will let you know,
Yeah.
or is there a way you could send them to me quickly
Yeah, I can do that.
today? I think Steph Ward has them all. I'm just not sure that I do.
Okay, I'll send you that document.
Okay, thank you.
Who's gonna design or put together the RFP?
Well, I think Dylan asked for job descriptions to be provided, for director, deputy director, or office manager, and, FBO. Services.
As we move forward, words matter. I mean, deputy director is a higher pay scale than office manager, so all these things, words will matter. Thought about that the other day.
That was the discussion one of the discussions that was had at the last transition meeting was in the report. Initially, we had said that it was like more of a office manager, and then that discussion changed to more of a assistant, director, deputy director, or whatever.
It's a little mix of both, but that's where the
Right,
job description
right.
kind of lays out.
I mean, we just wanted to mention that, there, in addition to Barry, who, understands this business and this airport very well, there are all kinds of other, airport managers, who are very skilled and, could help you with these descriptions. Dan Sal, he's the COO at Cherry Cap. He's also the president of MAAE. I'm sure he would be willing to lend a hand in helping to develop these RFPs.
Can you provide it for us?
I'm not sure.
Stephanie?
I don't know that we are going to be willing to do that.
Okay.
I think we can reach out to other airports. I'm sure there's places we can get RFPs and, yeah, I don't think that's.
So do we need to have action today from this board once you have the RFPs or the description to release for RFP? Do we need to authorize that?
Your board, yes, so today I would say your board should come to an agreement that this is the road that we wanna take, and allow whoever to get those created to start the process. Right.
So, for the sake of time, I think we should do that and authorize,
Well, I think you're gonna discuss some things in closed session.
Barry, if you don't have anything else for Mead and Hunt, I think we're going to jump off now and,
I believe that is true. Adam, got anything else?
No, thank you very much.
yes, thank you all.
Okay, so back to committee reports. We just went through transition committee, executive committee did not meet, capital projects committee, I think, did meet, right, George?
Yes.
Do you wanna bring us up to speed on that?
Basically, Barry gave us, myself and Preston, Karen wasn't present, a good overview of what, is going on, where the money comes, where it needs to go, and what we need to be doing. Mostly for Preston's, knowledge, since he's the newest one on the board here with, the capital committee.
So, is there anything, go ahead.
We'll probably
I'm
have to get together with Karen and then make a list of priorities and
Right.
things like that, and get an idea what we're gonna be moving forward with and what monies we have.
That'd be great. Can you guys look into the fuel tank in terms of its age? And I really don't know, I don't even know if the tank's above ground or buried, I don't know how many gallons it holds, I don't know how old it is, I don't know anything about it.
A follow-up of the meeting was George and I were gonna get together later today
Oh,
to start kind of a capital asset
Inventory.
inventory plan.
this is great. Okay. Budget. Budget committee,
Did not meet,
okay, bylaws,
did not meet.
okay. Are you rescheduling that, Barry? Or is that this Friday? Did you say you had a,
One of those is later this week. And in general, I have a comment on committees. Very few committees actually met when they said they were gonna meet. Some attempted to reschedule, often without even letting me know when they were rescheduled for. I believe each committee needs a chair,
okay?
so that there's someone responsible for actually following through on making sure the meeting happens. Because right now, it was very fluid and it wasn't working well this past month. This was our first month of trying, so.
Okay. George, do you wanna chair the capital committee?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, George.
You know, remember this time.
One less thing on your plate.
Executive committee, I guess,
You get to chair that by default.
sounds good. Budget committee, I think that's, me and Preston, and is there a third? There's probably a third. Yeah, you're right. Okay, Preston?
I can share it.
That, fella. Bylaws committee, is that you, Karen, and somebody else?
Is that you?
I don't believe so.
Bylaws, Lindsay?
Karen and Dylan.
Karen and Dylan? You wanna share that one? Thank you, Karen. Welcome to retirement.
Bylaws thing sent to me.
Okay, rental car, I'm working with Cindy on that one. I'll head that up. So Karen, are you gonna establish a time to meet with, on the bylaws then?
I think we have a
I
meeting
think
for
we have
this
one
week.
scheduled
This
soon
week.
on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's on, I thought it was this week. I had to transfer everything to a different phone, so it's like, this is.
It is Thursday at 9:30. At least that's what I have.
This Thursday at 9:30?
Thursday at 9:30.
Okay, that's a conflict for me. I'm in the housing commission meeting.
So we'll let you guys huddle up and figure out a time there. On car rental committee, I'll give a little update there. Cody said he spoke with his lender, and has approval. I think that in speaking with Ben yesterday, you know, I've talked to, an individual at Avis. I don't know that the individual was the right individual, but nonetheless, he said that Avis would not be interested in this market. I think, Barry, you've spoken with Hertz, and they've expressed to you.
I've spoken with Enterprise, Cody's spoken with her.
Okay. We've made a real effort to canvass the nationals. Ben Munson said they have some contacts in the rental car world, and he volunteered to make those outreaches this week. I think that, you know, I would not want to be in a situation where we find out 2 weeks after we reach an agreement with Cody that we have a national that's interested, because the market probably, while we have to offer the opportunity to multiple, it would be discouraging to one of them to split the market share. So I think we should, a couple of things. One, is there a draft, in terms of some airport policies that we've talked about?
I shared that with the committee.
Yes.
So yes, there is,
So it's in our-
the committee has had it.
Okay.
And I can also get you a draft contract for rental car vendors that use.
Okay. So I think what,
But if you want to make any changes to that, then
meet and review and bring it back to the board for adoption.
Yep. So there are steps potentially that committee needs to do. Earlier, when you were reaching out with Cody, you had expressed to him that you wanted him to be operating by Memorial Day. That timeline is getting short-ish, especially if there are changes the committee's gonna wanna make that the board needs to approve for that agreement.
Well, I think you're right. And I think that we owe it the airport to throw up one last Hail Mary here with Contour and see if through their network, they can get a meaningful conversation. And if we're delayed a couple of weeks, I think we've got a great alternative in Cody. He says he can ramp up quickly, and
I just.
sure, no, you're absolutely right.
I just wanna, you know, is he still on track for those dates? And, you know, again, from his business perspective, he doesn't wanna end up being in a position where he's starting this in October, going into the slow season. He's gonna do it this year, he's gonna wanna start as we go into the prime.
He's not indicated anything to me to say that he's not on track to start in May. He said he's talked to staff, has interviewed a person, had financing approval, web, reservation system. Okay, and transition committee. We've had conversations and have been working on the meet and hunt report, and, you know, Barry and Dylan and I talked, George and I have talked, and the report is before y'all now. But I think that's our committee reports. Barry, am I missing something, or is there anything you want to add there? Okay, then, director's report.
Okay, sure. So, airport incidents, accidents, so, I think this was actually mentioned earlier, Contour had an incident with their de-ice truck, it caught on fire, and it has caught on fire before, but it was not a real fire that was engulfing things. This actually was, so we actually had, first time in all the years I've been here, we had to expend a fire extinguisher to put it out. So a little excitement, that day. I attended the state airports conference in Lansing on the 19th and 20th. And actually, we talked about the ice trucks catching on fire. Apparently, this is fairly common. Marquette has had this, Traverse City has had this. What came out of that discussion was airport fire truck will not respond to put out a fire on anything that's not actually an aircraft incident, because if someone pushes the wrong button and dispenses foam, it's a $40,000 cleanup operation, and we don't want to be in that situation. So those types of fires, it's call 911 and get the fire department to respond. Not our responsibility. So that was kind of an interesting conversation to have amongst the airports. TSA lease for the TSA space, I'm going back and forth with them on this. They don't understand our processes. They just assume that they can give me a lease and I can sign it. And I said, that doesn't work that way. I have to take it to the board and they have to authorize it, and then they determine who the signator is. So we're trying to figure out those details. The Aeronautics
Gary,
Commission.
can you help me understand that a little bit more?
Yes.
What I heard there is we're trying to figure out who the signatory is of a contract.
We haven't seen the contract yet. So they're saying as part of their documentation to release the contract, they have to know who the signatory is.
Okay, so should we discuss that so we can tell them who it's gonna be?
I guess. I mean,
How are we
that's not
gonna-
normally our process.
How are we gonna bring it to resolution so we get a contract? We're trying to solve a chicken and egg here.
I'm waiting to hear back from, I explained our process to them. I'm waiting to hear back from them as to how they can accommodate our process.
Who signed off on it last time? You or the chair?
Russ Pomeroy.
Treasurer.
It was actually a contract with the county.
As the finance, not as the.
Yes, and that's actually part of the problem is it has to be redone under the authority, but
So what if we told them the chair was gonna sign it, and upon our legal review, our attorney said it should be the airport director, or our attorney said it should be the secretary, or our attorney advised it should be somebody else, and as part of our contract modifications, we submitted that with a change, and that was a way to break the logjam.
if the board wants to do something at this point, I can then take that information and forward on to GSA saying, this may help you get this completed.
Well, it just seems like we're at a stalemate for 4 months, I don't know what else to do.
Well, this is a new stalemate. The previous ones were the fact that the previous contract was with the county, not with the authority. So that has taken them a long time, and quite frankly, I don't know if they were operating very well through the month of January and part of February as they were reshuffling their actions. So
Well, my recommendation would be tell them the chair will sign the contract, but
I would need a board, a formal resolution.
do we need
for
to,
that.
need to amend the agenda to make that resolution?
That would be something to be made right now.
Okay, great. I would just like to add, that it's my personal preference not to sign any contracts till we have directors and officers insurance.
It's on the agenda later.
Which is on the agenda. So with that caveat, somebody would like to make a motion, have the chair sign this contract with TSA.
GSA.
Oh, GSA, I'm sorry, my eyes are getting bad.
Well, no. Just one letter changed.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you,
I'll support it.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you.
So Lindsay, if I could get a document that says formally that the authority has authorized the chair to sign documents over to GSA, is what I need to give to them.
Okay.
Official. Oh, we're still in meet. So this Wednesday, the State Aeronautics Commission is meeting where, the final grants will be awarded under that grant program that we applied for, so we will know in a couple days. Door security system, which is basically the last outstanding capital project under our ARPA grant. That was mostly completed on Friday. We actually switched over Friday night to using the new system. There's still a follow-up call that has to happen with the front entry doors. I actually need the contractor for the locks as well as the contractor for the door here at the same time so they can coordinate two systems working together. On Saturday, we installed in our waiting area new seating. All the seats you see in the middle are now new. We now have accommodations in there for 30 people. And we took out, there was a table, it was over the years when we only had 9-seat aircraft, it just accumulated. It became actually TSA's break room, so that's where they ate lunch. We've now turned it into a passenger waiting area with 30 seats.
Can I just ask for one thing? Where you have chairs sitting against the wall,
Yeah.
especially those chairs, could you put a rail, some sort of protection? Because it'll destroy your wall,
Okay,
because people will hit it.
I will look into that, yes.
Yeah, otherwise you're painting and fixing every year.
So we first started looking, so the chairs around the outside are what were here, and we had 17 of those from when the terminal was built. We looked at trying to acquire more so they would match. Those chairs actually run $700 per seat. The ones that we did acquire are about $75 per seat. So they're not nearly the same quality, but just great.
They fit the need at the moment.
Yeah.
Probably easier to make, clean and.
So enplanements for, actually, I don't think I'm not sure if we had the January numbers for our last meeting or not. But for January, we did fairly well, I think about 35% growth. For February, we were a little over 10% growth, versus previous year. So, we're in December, we were up 90%. In January, we were up 35%. In February, we were up 10%. There have been things that have impacted Contour's ability to, operate more passengers, and I'm gonna touch on some of those later in my report. But we're still doing slightly better than Cape Air. Operationally, in last month, in February, and Ben gave you March's numbers, which are very good. February was not so good. On time, 54%, with 36% being delayed and 10% being canceled for the month of February. On the airfare side, and I touched on this a little bit when one of my questions to Ben. So we are now the most expensive airport. They're up there. We're now the most expensive airport in the region. It's not like that's never been the case in the past, but it is rare that is the case. What surprises me, and I don't have an answer, is why we are more expensive than Muskegon, because their service is essentially the same as ours. It's a short hop flight to Chicago and then connecting. They don't have code shares, so they're just dealing with interlines, so we should be pairing up the same types of fares, and for some reason, it's coming out a little bit differently. Not that much different, but enough to push us higher. Traverse City right now is actually really, I would say, a bargain. They're only less than $20 on average more than Grand Rapids is right now, and they're actually the cheapest in a good third of the markets. And if you see on Traverse City, it's all American. So American was pricing aggressively out of Traverse City this current month, and they're not as aggressive out of Chicago. So we are at a disadvantage because we don't have code share, which is why I asked that question. If you include, trying to level out because we have free parking, so we have other incentives, that brings the average more in line, but most people don't base their decision thinking about all costs. They look at the bottom line.
Barry, is there anything that we should follow up with Contour on? Like, if you go back up there.
So what I said to Ben is I want to talk to him later, and this is what I want to talk to him later about.
Okay,
Just
great.
why is this happening?
Sure.
Well, I don't know if the cost of here has gotten that much more expensive, it's just it's gotten less at the other airports.
Correct.
Because it's not expensive.
Well, look at Orlando, MCO Orlando. You fly Manistee at $556, and you can go from Traverse City to 200. And that's everybody going to Disney.
I just did that last Friday.
From here?
Yeah, but I also, I know about the free parking, but I totally agree to Barry's point. When I was just looking at the price between Google, I mean, they're going, what, $350 difference? I was gonna fly it anyways because I wanted to, but the convenience part, I'm not sure people just, they're looking at the numbers.
Yep. Any other questions?
It's, when we were here,
Mhm.
I put up our website, and I put in Manistee to Boston,
Mhm.
and when it came up in the Manistee, MBL, it says, would you like to book a TV at Traverse City?
Right.
So does that, I mean, how come that comes up?
Well, because, I mean, we don't have the search engine that Google does, so we're using Google, and that's one of their features, is they're trying to get you the lowest fare, so they're gonna suggest other alternatives that are cheaper.
Block it.
Which is why it matters for a lot more.
Yes, it
That
does.
those things, but I don't want to trick people into flying out of here, even if they could save money elsewhere. I mean, they should make decisions based on all the facts, but our fares need to be competitive. Don't have to be the lowest, but we need to be competitive. It's
Gone down to.
More
That will
flights.
change very soon.
yes, it's the summer, that is not the case at all. So capital projects, so our ALP update, still no update at conference. I actually talked to the person whose desk this is theoretically on, and she said, I don't know about what the status of that is. Send me a reminder and I'll look into it. So.
Right there?
So, stuff going on around our current major projects. So, last month, the board approved the sponsored contract for the major source of funding for this project, which covers the first two bullet points, the runway safety area and the runway lighting. The beacon, which is part of what was bid out as part of that project, is under bill funding. For the first time in a response from MDOT, they actually added the word if that funding comes through. Up until now, it's always been, well, we're waiting on it. I think given uncertainties around federal funding of things, now they're even questioning if those funds will ever happen, which puts into question how this project happened. So we had a meeting, Mead & Hunt, myself, and the contractor on Friday, bringing the contractor up to speed with the fact that we're waiting on funding for a piece of it. Talked about, could those be scheduled, broken out into different phases, et cetera. So we discussed schedule. This project will result in a 10-day to 2-week closure of the airport. So we will not have contour service for 10 days to 2 weeks when this project happens. I'm doing the lighting on the main runway, contour needs. Therefore, I have been very clear throughout this whole project, this project shall not happen between mid-May and Labor Day, which, given a Michigan construction season, is half your construction season. Last year, the plan was to do this project early May, to get it in before that. Given all of the unknowns, we all agreed on this call, that's not happening. They would have had to have ordered all of the electrical equipment, because there's a 10 to 12-week lead time on that equipment right now, by now, to do a May project. So the last item there I have there is potential significant issues with the project. We have the sponsor contract. We have the funding for 3/4 of this project. That sponsor contract has a dollar amount on it. That dollar amount was based on the bids we received for this project. If the contractor can't hold their pricing now until September, and they say, we can't do this project because things have gone up, and one thing I know will go up is, because this is a federal project, it has to pay Davis-Bacon wages, which get reset every year in July, so their labor costs will go up for a project after July 1st. The possibility exists that they say, we can't do this. If they can't, well, we can't, because we already have the funding and the grant, we can't change the amount of the project unless the airport wants to kick in the difference, which I know we're just not gonna say, oh yeah, $200,000 will kick in to cover that difference. So as this rolls out, and we're still waiting for this bill funding to come in or not come in, there's a lot of potential issues that this project could get messy before it gets resolved. In talking with Mead and Hunt after our call, I asked them, have you ever run into projects that this has happened to? And they said, no, but this year we're potentially expecting to have more than one project along these lines, because funding has just been so unpredictable. So I don't have anything specific. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up that this won't happen in May. We're now tentatively trying to reschedule it for September. They're going to get back to us whether they can hold pricing or not, and if they can't, then we have to start conversations of how to handle that while we wait for the last quarter of the funding through the bill.
And why can't we go back to the federal government and ask them to make up the difference?
That's not the way the process works. Now.
So all this funding is coming through the kitty, so to speak, correct? So the FAA kitty?
Yes.
So that money comes from, it's not something that gets allocated out of general fund dollars. That comes from all the taxes that go into that kitty.
Correct. Specifically, this was coming from discretionary funding, which is kind of a separate amount that the FAA manages. But yes, it is coming out of FAA AIP funding. So again, your question, Adam, is that's not their process. That doesn't mean processes can't be changed or argued, but we'll get there when we get there to know what needs to be done.
Are you provided, I'm gonna call it prevailing wage, you used a different word, Bradley.
Davis-Bacon.
There you go. Provided Davis-Bacon wage requirements increase, are you telling us you're completely confident that project will cost more than?
No, I'm,
Okay.
generally, contractors, once presented with all the facts, just cave and basically say, well, if we want this project, that's what we have to do, because the mechanisms are aligned such that you can't go above. But there's no guarantee, because we don't have a signed contract with the contractor yet, because we couldn't sign a contract, because we don't have the funding to pay for it, so therefore, we're in this situation. So, we're hoping that when they get back to us this week with pricing, that they'll say, we can hold pricing for a September reschedule.
Would you be willing to just send the board an email as to what the contractor told us? This week. Just a status as opposed to waiting
Okay,
until the
okay.
next meeting.
You know, once I hear more information. on
Yeah,
it.
right.
Okay, yep,
Uh-huh.
yep.
Thank you.
Next one is our T-hanger door. This is caught up in that same bill funding, scenario. In addition to that, I'm dealing with MDOT on a fee determination. So, part of FAA funding rules, the consulting design piece of a project, needs to go through a process to verify that it is a reasonable fee for the project. If the project is over $100,000 in design fees, you must now do this independent fee estimate, which we've now paid for 2 of those, one for the project I just was talking about. Those run $5,000 to $7,000. If you're paying a consultant $5,000 to $7,000 to justify the fee that another consultant wants to charge you. If the project fee is less than $100,000, you can use comparables. That is something the state provides for us as a service. T-hanger door upgrades are not something that there's a lot of comparables for, so they've pulled out 2 somewhat similar, one from 2012, and one more recent than that, within the last couple of years. And they've said that at a cursory look, Mead and Hunt fees are not within the range of acceptable. They're really comparing apples and oranges, and so potentially we might have to go and get a third-party IFE done if we can't convince the state or convince Mead and Hunt to lower their costs to get this project moving forward. But the problem is, from my perspective, with not knowing the bill funding, which will ultimately pay for this, so that IFE is reimbursable, but that's only reimbursable if the project actually gets funded. So I don't want to spend money on an IFE if ultimately this funding isn't gonna come through. So I've got some follow-up with the state to try to justify with them why this project is different and how they misread some of the data, but that's where this project stands. Did that make sense to people?
I thought all the door hangers for the T-hangers, I thought all the doors got taken care of a few years back.
No, we did one as a prototype. And we've been trying to find funding source for it. We just decided, because of the scope, not to utilize our ARPA funds for this. And at that time, this bill funding became available, so we decided to use these funds to do it. Now the bill funding is up in the air. Remarking crack sealing, not much has changed here, other than the fact that feedback I'm getting from the state is we're now gonna be scheduled early in this year's program, since we didn't get, they ran out of time last year in the fall due to the season ending, to get it done last year. But if this doesn't get done in a timeline before our annual FAA 139 inspection, we will be written up this year as a deficiency because that hasn't gotten accomplished. Kind of a heads up. It's planned for this year. I don't have a date because the state hasn't even figured out what their program is going to be this year, but there may be a timing issue with our inspection and getting this work done.
So the state would fine us, but the state is the holdup?
No, it's FAA that does our inspection, and the state is running that project. There's no fine, it's
Technical.
it's a deficiency, so we'll then have to come up with a plan to address the deficiency, which will be, it's already scheduled, and it's more work to deal with the paperwork of that. Contour service, we've probably gone through all of this already, but I think this last note is important. For us to grow to 10,000 employments this year, which we think is doable, the reality is that we need to, on average, see 40% growth. January, we had 35%. In February, we had 10%. March, I'm projecting between 10 and 20%. So we are, at the early part of the year, not seeing the growth we need to hit 10,000 this year. That could all change come summer. And quite frankly, we've gotten the worst of things behind us because winter is always going to be more challenging.
Terry?
Yes.
Would you be willing to put together a memo for the board? Stephanie, and I took some notes, but I don't know that they're completely accurate or comprehensive. Stephanie advised that if we do hit 10,000 and become a primary airport, there's a bunch of things that we're going to, additional paperwork that will have to be done, and costs that we may incur. And I think as our budget committee starts to meet and looks ahead.
The problem is, I don't know what those are, because I've never been in a situation where we've been that, so, but I'll try to take what Stephanie told us, I'll reach back out to Mead and Hunt and try to put together, some of that.
It would be good to understand.
So don't forget. So, right now I have some concerns with the trajectory of things with Contour as it relates to booking and passengers. So, from the data I collect, the first graph shows the number of seats basically they sold per month in comparison to the previous year. So, in October, we were up 27% versus previous year, and that's not surprising because they basically started from zero just before October, so there was a backfill that was needed to, sell seats. November, we were up 31%, and that was probably still some of that backfill. December, up 135%, and we actually saw our boardings in December being up 90%, so that kind of is tracking. In January, we barely eked out an increase over what Cape Air sold last year in January, and in February, we were actually down 12% from what Cape Air sold a year ago. So this trend is going the wrong direction, and it's just an observation, and I got a question later on with some possible explanations for it. Another metric I keep is, this is kind of each month, on the first of the month, I keep a total of kind of the current month, so November 1st, so October total passengers, plus advanced bookings for the next 3 months, and then kind of a total. You'll kind of see that that metric showed us that on November 1st, we were up 3% versus a year ago. December 1st, we were up 16. January 1st, we were up 70%. February 1st, we're up 26%. March 1st, we're down 3%. Where the down is coming from is bookings farther out are significantly behind. The number of passengers, again, in December was much higher, January, February, less. So, again, it's a trend. Possible reasons. One could be Contour's performance challenges. We've all seen, or we've probably all seen, some of the social media chatter that's been out there, and it hasn't been pretty. And I think that has an impact. I also believe, the second bullet point, that the national political uncertainty and economic uncertainty is having an impact. In fact, last week, all three majors, Delta, American, United, announced they were not going to hit their Q1 numbers because of soft domestic demand.
And reduced flights.
Well, and now they're going to be reducing flights as a result. So we're likely caught up in macroeconomic issues that are, and then you layer on top some poor performance and some bad press, and those come together. And then the third is, it doesn't help being that we have now the current highest fares of our comparable airports. And there may be some other factors. But, all is not rosy as it comes to these booking trends. But I believe that, challenges that remain for Contour, weather, that's always going to be a challenge. We leave snow season and now we go into thunderstorm season, but, different issues. There are mechanical issues. I think Ben did a good job of addressing that already. Delays, cancellation, all those comments, customer service. I expect improvements just mostly because winter's behind us, or most of it. And that's going to reduce delays and cancellations. And then where Contour shines is when they operate normally, it's a wonderful service. So we'll get more of that and less of the negative, and that's going to help us going forward. Next winter, we hope we don't have a repeat.
So, when their sales were through the roof, like 135% up in December.
Yep.
They ran a major sale. It was a huge sale. They were running.
But that sale wasn't for seats so their bookings were up in December, but their enplanements were up in December too. So they sold a lot of seats probably because of the sale. They filled planes because they were actually operating still good at that point.
And so I think what my question is what, has there been any conversation between you and Contour on how to combat the slump in sales and the trend? The discussion on, we need to market different, we need to run a sale?
Not yet.
We need to reverse?
Part of this information is I'm pulling this together and, seeing these trends. So some of this is I'm recently noticing. But overall, I would say that part of the reason I wanted to talk to Ben, after this meeting is to start having some of these conversations. One other thing I will notice is despite the trend I mentioned here, actually in the last 10 days, so all this stuff goes through the end of last month, in the last 10 days, things have started to turn around. For example, yesterday, I believe it was the most bookings on a Sunday, certainly of this year, and possibly since Contour started. So it could just be that federal government didn't shut down on Friday and people were like, oh, okay, we can plan our spring, our spring trip now. I don't know, so I'm seeing actually improvement. That also corresponds to Contour's operating 100% completion this month. So it's not panic, but it's just observations. So we already talked about that. So the hiring update, so they just added, their second full-time maintenance position here. He or she moved up here, this past week. They still have 2 open positions, at the station, 1 full-time and 1 part-time, so they're still trying to be fully staffed. And then the last thing I have is, I'm on vacation starting this Friday through April 3rd. Any questions?
What are you saying?
Don't call, don't write,
I'm generally am forced to be at least available through email. I have to check that every day, but I probably won't be answering the phone.
Okay. Nothing under old business, so we'll go to new business. Directors and officers insurance, request for proposal. I think we should have directors and officers coverage for the benefit of all of our directors and officers. In case there's ever a lawsuit, that would defend us in that suit. It's customary on every board that I've sat on. So, I've inquired with, what pricing is for that, and it's around $500 to $700 from one insurance company. We could call a few locals, get proposals, but, what I would entertain for the group is, approval not to exceed, some number, maybe say $1,000 to buy the insurance and get it bound and get it done as soon as possible.
Make that motion.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Preston. Let's do a roll call.
Mr. Adam Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. P. Cardy?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, closed session to review and discuss attorney-client privilege opinion letter.
So you need a motion to go into closed session.
Yeah.
The motion needs to include who
Stays in the room.
Correct. And, hang on, there's actual verbiage that we have.
Okay, good. That's why I'm glad you're here, Lisa.
Lisa?
You have it? Oh, what did we have then? I thought we talked about that. So your motion to go into closed session to review and discuss attorney written opinion. So it should be, I move to go into closed session to review and discuss an attorney-client privilege opinion letter dated March 13th, 2025, issued by our attorney, Bonnie G. Toskey of Cole Stoker and Toskey PC in Lansing pursuant to MCL 15.268(1)H.
I'll make that motion.
That didn't describe who's in the
No,
closed
we
session.
didn't.
No, but then you'll say who you want to stay.
You can do that next.
My first,
That's okay.
executive session.
We
Okay,
are including everybody
To
in the room.
include,
well, our authority members or, Barry?
Do you want, I don't know
Well, I think,
involved or not.
yeah, I think the discussion is,
Authority.
from Bonnie, it would be all authority members, and then the recording secretary, and then if you want me in here, I think Barry is excluded from the conversation.
Okay.
So everyone except Barry. Sorry, Barry.
It's kind of, given that I wasn't involved, that's what I was assuming was going to be the case.
Great, thank you. So there's a motion by Karen and a second by Preston, is that right? Call the roll there, Lindsay?
Mr. Adam Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. P. Cardy?
Yes.
So then we would need you to stop